Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Israeli warplanes continue to strike Hezbollah targets in Beirut, even as officials from Lebanon and Israel say they're close to a ceasefire. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports from Beirut. Both countries' cabinets are meeting today and tomorrow to discuss details.
Lebanese lawmaker Simon Abi Ramia tells NPR his government has approved what he says would be an initial 2-month ceasefire. It calls for Israeli troops to withdraw from Lebanon and for Hezbollah to pull its fighters and weapons north of the Litani River, about 20 miles from the Israeli border. The Lebanese army would move in alongside United Nations peacekeepers. An international committee would also be set up to monitor implementation of the ceasefire. Israel had asked for the right to preemptively strike Hezbollah if it suspects militants of violating this agreement. But Abi Ramia says that provision is not part of the deal he's seen. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, Beirut.
President-elect Donald Trump says he will impose 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods and an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. He says it's to persuade these countries to stop undocumented migrants and illegal drugs from entering the U.S. The 2024 presidential election saw dramatic shifts among some demographic groups toward Donald Trump. But NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports it remains a question whether Republicans can hold the coalition together after Trump's election.
Young voters, Latinos, and Asian American voters in key states swung 20 points or more in Trump's direction. These are all groups that have tended to vote Democratic over the years. So are they now Republican voters, or did they simply shift because they felt prices were too high and they blame the incumbent party? How they judge Trump's job performance and whether another Republican can fire up white voters without college degrees to the same extent is going to be key in the next 4 years. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
Retailer Walmart is rolling back efforts to address generations of disparity experienced by historically marginalized people in the U.S. The nation's largest employer has decided to end significant diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and policies. NPR's Kristen Wright reports.
Walmart is making sweeping changes to its DEI efforts. It's ending its Center for Racial Equity, started in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. Walmart established the center by making a 5-year commitment to address the root causes of systemic disparities among Black people. Walmart will also no longer consider race and gender in making decisions on supplier contracts. And the retailer is ending participation in the Human Rights Campaign's index that measures the workplace inclusion of LGBTQ+ employees. Walmart's rollback of DEI promises follows similar changes by a growing list of big corporations, including Lowe's, Ford, and John Deere. Kristen Wright, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Striking North Shore teachers are seeking a meeting with Governor Maura Healey at the State House this morning as schools in Beverly and Marblehead remain closed for a third week. Both sides have been ordered to take part in a fact-finding process with a state mediator who will then issue a recommendation. The co-president of the Beverly Teachers Union, Julia Brotherton, says that process would only prolong the strike.
It's very rarely used. It is not effective. What the fact finder will most likely say is that both sides need to return to the bargaining table. So we're already here. We are so close.
Beverly School Committee decided to withhold pay from teachers until they go back to class. They're urging the union to cooperate with the fact-finding process. Right whale experts say an unusually high number of the critically endangered whales may spend this winter in Cape Cod Bay. Researchers with the Center for Coastal Studies spotted 3 right whales last week. Those are the first local sightings of the season. The center's Ryan Schlossberg says one of them was feeding.
We saw it from pretty far away because it was skim feeding, so it was feeding at the surface of the water, which is a behavior we don't usually see until pretty late into our season, March, April, May, so very unusual.
The team says the whale found a rare, dense patch of tiny crustaceans. They say that means that many more whales could travel to feed in that water. We've got umbrella weather today. Showers for your Tuesday, highs in the 40s. Mostly clear skies tonight, lows in the 30s. Sunny tomorrow, highs again in the 40s. And clouds Wednesday night with a rainy Thanksgiving, highs only in the mid-40s, and rain Thursday night. Sunshine returns on Friday. Right now it's 45 in Boston. This is GBH.
Yeah.
Ready, I am
am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 12:30, we're going to speak to Senator Ed Markey. He's going to zoom in. He's been over at the climate COP event, COP29, I think it is, isn't it?
Yep, it is, yeah.
And from 1 to 2, we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. She's going to be here tomorrow to take our questions and yours.
She's here today.
She's here today.
We're back tomorrow.
Thank you, right. She's going to be here today from 1 to 2, doing well here so far. And I'm going to be...
But if she doesn't do well, we're going to invite her back tomorrow to see if she can do any better. So we'll see.
We will not be here on Thanksgiving or on Friday. No, we are not.
Okay.
Hello, Jim.
Well, I'm glad we got that straight. Thank you. It's a hell of a start, like most days.
It's good. Well, it takes me a while to get warmed up.
It's not like riding a bicycle. In any case, we're starting the show with your calls and texts. In case you've been under a rock since Election Day, for whatever reason, here's the most comprehensive assessment of the news. Here.
Thanksgiving is the busiest travel holiday of all.
We're 1 week out from one of the busiest travel days of the year.
Yep, they are expecting record-breaking travel. And you've heard that if you're traveling today, then you're going to want to leave as early as possible, right?
And I'm told this could even be a record for Thanksgiving travel.
You could see crowds at the airport like we've never seen before. The TSA says it could be the busiest Thanksgiving travel week ever.
What a shock. So apparently this week is supposed to be pretty busy for travel. Call us at 877-301-8970 or text us. Tell us your travel strategies for Thanksgiving. If you haven't left now, apparently, according to this newscast, you think you'll ever get there by Thursday. and if you're on the road, how many bathroom stops do you allow on the journey?
Or the kids.
And how many are we there yet complaints before you lose your mind? Plus, can I add one more thing to this?
What?
Because we only have 2 more shows today and tomorrow. When Andrea Campbell will be on both days, from what I understand. Maybe the governor will be here both days, too. Who knows? But the other thing I'd like to add to this...
We're not going to be here Thursday or Friday.
No, we're not. Well, unless Andrea Campbell doesn't do well tomorrow either, in case we'll come back on Thanksgiving. No, my point was this. I looked up this morning. The average calorie consumption, or average is the wrong word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A woman is 2,000 a day.
Okay.
A man is 2,500 a day. So what is the limit you put on yourself for Thanksgiving Day? 10,000? What is the number?
I don't know.
Beyond which you say, I have had enough? 877-301-8970.
Apparently 1 in 4 people are still trying to lose the weight they gained at last year's Christmas and holiday celebrations. But you know what? I find these things very reassuring. Before
the travel thing?
No, because it's kind of like before the storm. They're going to have 2 inches of snow. I hope we do have some snow this year. We haven't had snow in so long. We have to, we get the warnings. Everybody has to run to the supermarket. They have to buy the tuna and the bread and the water, like we're not going to be able to eat for 2 weeks. This is like a ritual. Every year we have to hear about how terrible it's going to be in the Massachusetts Turnpike. You need to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning. They've never seen crowds like it's like Trump. You know what Trump always says? Like you've never seen before.
Ever,
like you've never seen before. It's going to be like you've never seen before. And apparently, if you haven't left already for Thanksgiving, it's too late.
By the way, even if you're only going to Medford, it's too late, apparently. 877-301-8970. So if you're on the road, like apparently somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 million of you are on the road, according to AAA. Does AAA exist? I mean, AAA exists.
Yes.
I love them,
we
by
love
the way.
AAA.
2 reasons. They essentially charge your battery when it's dead for free because you already paid your fee. And on Thanksgiving, they tell you it's going to be the busiest travel day in the history of Western civilization. It's really unbelievable.
Well, they
are
tell
you traveling, by the way?
I'm going a block and a half to my ex-husband's.
So I would leave tomorrow if I were you for Thursday.
You can just walk right down the street.
That's another
with all the fixins. We're bringing all the fixins with us. We'll walk right down the street.
Okay, fine. 877-301-8970.
I used to go to Connecticut to Thanksgiving, and it once took me 6 hours.
Is that really true?
To get from here to Stamford, Connecticut.
That is really incredible.
You sat in the Mass Pike forever, and then you try to get off the Mass Pike to figure out an alternative route, and then that's even worse. And you just sit there, and then you have the children in the car, and as you say, when are we going to be there? When are we going to be there?
It's not just children.
Then you have to
Adults
stop
do this
to go to the bathroom. Then you have to stop to get something to eat.
These are all good points you're making.
It's an incredible
How about
ordeal
the calorie? Can we get to the calorie limit thing? You are somebody, and I resent this, even though I'm very fond of you, who's never had a weight problem in your whole life, other than when you swallowed the bread that was not fully baked.
That's right.
With the ashram in California.
Cooked in my stomach.
Cooked in your stomach. Your stomach almost exploded. That was when Marjorie was at Stanford. In college, do you set a calorie limit, or is your attitude if I can roll to the couch... conscious
Well, you
that
know,
I am okay.
But you wonder about all the people now that are taking the weight loss things, the Wegovy and all that. Thanksgiving could be a whole new thing because I think that's one of the things with those drugs, right? You don't.
The desire
eat
is
like
down?
I think that's one of the theories. You don't eat like you used to.
See what Biden's trying to do on the way out the door, by the way? Is make them Medicaid, Medicare reimbursable, which is
I think that would be wonderful.
I don't know if he can. I don't understand if he can
Where's
do this
the
in
turkey?
55 days.
Have we had the turkey?
The pardoning. By the way, I'm so glad you brought of all the
That's
things that
another
upsets me.
ritual.
It is the sickest, most childish, obscene. I'm not taking a PETA position, by the way, on this. But do you not find it juvenile and absurd that they do this turkey pardoning at the White House?
I like all this stuff.
You do?
I like the traffic reports. I like the turkey pardoning. I like the tuna and bread and water in the snowstorms. I like to be going to the grocery store, before we get like 3 inches and everybody's fighting over what's left. Okay.
By the way, it's Peach and Blossom were the two names of the pardoned whatever turkeys.
Listen to this, Casey in Somerville. My travel strategy is to pretend to be away visiting relatives. I will close up the house, leave the driveway empty, then my wife and I can stay inside and do Thanksgiving by ourselves.
I like
Isn't that romantic?
That's actually a good strategy.
I think that's very nice. Okay, let's go to the phones. Hold on. Riley from Worcester. Every year I hear the same refrain of how busy the roads will be at peak travel times. And we always drive to the Cape from Worcester Thanksgiving morning, and the road is empty, especially compared to summertime. That's one of the weird things. Apparently the least number of cars on the road are on Thanksgiving Day.
I know, but did you need to hear a newscaster tell you that? Isn't that obvious?
But it was Thanksgiving Day that took me 6 hours to get to.
That's not true. I'm sorry.
It's true.
I don't accept that.
To get for Stamford, Connecticut, which should be like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, took me 6 hours on Thanksgiving Day. And the poor dog that I forgot, the dog
walker. On the roof of the car?
No, the dog walker forgot to come get the dog. I was terrible.
What happened?
Well, the poor dog was alone like for 14 hours. I felt so guilty.
You left the dog?
Well, I had the dog walker. I was supposed to come get the dog and take the dog to her house.
So you just said, good luck, Harry?
I did not know until I got home.
I don't
later
find. Raise your right hand and say you didn't know.
I didn't know.
I don't believe
I would never have left my beloved dog, Harry the best dog from C to C.
I know. Donna on the road says, and this is sort of my motto, I eat until my elastic waistband cannot expand any further. I know this is not healthy. I'm just trying to be real.
No, that's the other thing, to plan your outfit. Do you want to wear loose-fitting clothing so you're not concerned about how much you eat, or do you want to wear, a tight pair of jeans or a cinching waist?
Tight pair of jeans? What are you, nuts?
Well, exactly. I think you have to plan your outfits as well.
I would say it's a sweatpant wearing kind of day. Let's go to Sheila in the car. We're talking Thanksgiving because it is only 2 days away. Hello, Sheila. Welcome.
Hello there, Jim and Marjorie, and happy Thanksgiving.
And of course
happy Thanksgiving to you too, Sheila.
I love talking about anything caloric, and I will say our eating style in our family is most of the time we say, be careful, you're getting some of that in your mouth. We are rather barbaric, and on Thanksgiving, this really did happen. One of the little ones said, I can't eat anymore, I'm full. And my brother said, no, you have to eat through those feelings.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Sheila, thank you.
That's pretty good.
That made my day. Happy Thanksgiving,
Sheila. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you, too. One of the texters points out that poor Hunter Biden must be annoyed that the turkeys got pardons and he's still waiting for his.
877-301-8097. This is sort of like a Thanksgiving potpourri, even though we're back tomorrow, too. The primary thing is your travel plans. If you left, by the way, no one's working this week, right? Except us. I mean, that is sort of.
I think a lot of people work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think the new thing is you don't show up Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then you have a whole week off kind of thing.
I don't think you can do it because you want to do that at Christmas. Don't you want to do that?
You do that at Christmas too, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people only get 2 weeks or 3 weeks vacation a year, Jim.
What happens? Can we get back to the calorie thing for a second before we get back to the calls? 877-301-8097. What happens when you can't stand up? I don't mean because of a disability. I mean the temporary disability of I'm serious, and you need help from the family members.
A lot of people, they eat early on Thanksgiving, right? They eat at noontime.
So they can eat again.
Then they really eat a lot. Then they go to the couch and they kind of fall asleep on the couch watching football games. Or the dog show, of course, is my...
That's Thursday.
That's Thursday.
My older daughter cannot wait.
Every year. I love the dog show.
Is that the Philadelphia one? Or which
it's the Philadelphia one.
Yeah.
Little dogs running into the competition, the hound dogs and the little tiny poodle dogs and all that. But then the parade is before that. But you eat Some people eat during the dog show, so they miss it, but then they collapse on the couch and they wake up, and then they can eat the turkey sandwich with all
same day with all the fixins, yeah, whatever
right.
that is. Sid in Michigan. Hello, Sid. Thank you for calling. What's your deal here?
Okay, hi guys. I've been listening to you for about 3 years, and I love your show.
Well, thank you. So
nice.
The
reason I called is we live in Clarkston, Michigan, and my daughter and son-in-law that live in Chicago are hosting Thanksgiving this year.
Oh, how nice.
But because we always gain an hour when we drive there, we leave here about 9 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah. And then we leave Saturday morning after we have breakfast with everybody, and no traffic problems either way.
That's a beautiful plan.
Very
you
lovely.
sound pretty confident in your planning, yes?
Oh, yes. We've done this more than one time.
Now, how many family members cannot get up from the Thanksgiving table on Thursday, Sid, in your family?
Oh, probably just about everybody.
That's
They're
nice.
just health conscious.
I like that. Sid, thank you for listening and thank you for calling. Call us again and enjoy Thanksgiving. 877-301-897. Anonymous says, I wear maternity pants and I'm a dude. That is actually a pretty good solution there.
Diane White, when I was a kid, used to be when I was young, used to be one of the best columnists of the Boston Globe. She was so funny.
Brilliant.
And that was one of her signature columns, that when you buy the first pair of elastic waist pants, you've just given up.
Sign of giving up.
You're not going to try
But it's true,
anymore.
don't you think?
Just throw it in the towel and.
What isn't that what sweatpants? Aren't sweatsuits? That's essentially why they exist. Is that not true? Because of the elasticity. That's why people wear
they're comfortable.
sweatpants.
That's right. You don't have to worry about them feeling the gripping your waistline or anything else when you're lounging around at home. Some people are working on Thanksgiving Day and Friday, which is always too bad. Anyway, 877-301-8970 is the number. Apparently, a lot of people are working this Friday. This year, I'm going to follow Jim's lead.
It's the hugest retail day. Well, I don't know if it is anymore. Black Friday, when pre-internet, was the biggest shopping day of the year by far. I don't know if it still is because all the Black Friday things happened before, plus they're online and all that sort of thing. But go ahead.
This year, I'm going to follow Jim's lead. I'm wearing a terry cloth robe to Thanksgiving. That's from Mike in North Carolina.
If I would, I could. I've told people before, it's not just on Thanksgiving, but my landlord in college, who owned a few buildings his father gave him, sort of Trumpian, by the way. The difference is this guy actually did some really important things in the West Philadelphia community. He ended up owning almost all West Philadelphia. And I'm not exaggerating. 24 hours a day, he was in a ratty orange terry cloth robe in the house, outside the house. Remember what I told you he had next to his bed in his house? He had his dead dog taxidermied in a plexiglass. He didn't want to leave the dog. So he had a what's wrong with that? He had the thing, what is that called? Not taxidermy. It's not stuffed. What is it?
I think it is.
Taxidermy?
You go to a taxidermist and you have the dogs
stuffed.
I think that's what it's called.
Sort of like a turducken.
The other thing is, do you want to go to a restaurant on Thanksgiving?
I'm going to a restaurant, so be careful.
You are?
I just said I was, yeah.
Doesn't that kind of, so there's going to be no late night eating of the fixins and leftover turkey?
No, actually, we're sleeping at the restaurant, so we're gonna have.
That's what they should do. They should do two phases: the meal and then the after meal.
And you just take a nap.
Or if you're going to, if you just got married or you're just with a new partner, you get to go to their family's house instead of your own house for Thanksgiving. All these things are difficult.
So you're making if people are not watching on YouTube, you're making a big face about going to a restaurant because you're really a traditionalist. Your attitude is the family's got to come over.
I think
got to go
more,
through that
I think
torture.
It's more fun to be at home. And then we have the political angle this year of people being upset about not getting along with their relatives. But we're trying to get better about that. Teddy from Providence says, I've witnessed a cousin's chair break. Oh, no. From under her on Thanksgiving. We put the gobble in the turkey gobble gobble at my family's Thanksgiving.
There's an honest person.
Yeah.
Sally in New Hampshire, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, I've called before, and I love you guys.
Thanks.
But this is kind of a tragedy. So I'm going to my daughter. It's not a tragedy that I'm going to my daughter's house.
No.
Because I'm going to see her family.
Oh, that's
However,
great.
I will be starving when I get up from the table because they're all vegans.
Oh.
So what are they serving?
Yeah.
What are they serving?
All right, so get this, a tofurkey.
Yeah,
Yes.
we tried a tofurkey on the show at our old station about 15 years ago.
Maybe
it was lacking.
Maybe they've improved.
I don't think so. What else do they serve, Sally?
I don't think so. But like with mashed potatoes and sweet potatoes. No butter. It's that fake stuff.
Oh, no butter.
This is a disaster.
I know, right? And even the pies, no butter, no cream, nothing. It's no ice cream on the pie. It's just vegan everything.
Sounds like a lot of fun to me, yeah. Yeah.
But I'm happy to see my family, my grandson. So there is a light at the end of this tunnel. But I will be starving when I get
Now,
up.
Sally, are you not? I assume, based on your retelling of this story, you are not permitted to bring, for example, a little Tupperware container of turkey and stuffing and a pat of butter or two, right?
I can't cheat. I will not bring anything that's not vegan. So,
oh, you're a good soul.
There you have it.
Enjoy the grandkids, Sally. Thanks for your call. Happy Thanksgiving.
Well, there
we really appreciate it.
are a lot of food issues now. People have vegans in their family. They have gluten-free people in their family. They have just plain old vegetarians in their family. People have nut issues in their family.
Do you have vegans or vegetarians in your family?
I do.
You do?
I do. Gluten-free.
And what are you doing about that?
Nut issues. Well, you have to
pretend like you're fine with it, right?
Well, no.
Because you're not. I know you fairly well.
No, I am. I mean, I think people get pretty sick from, you can't have, if you're allergic to peanuts or you're allergic to tree nuts, you can't be eating them, Jim.
So what do you do?
I don't serve, well, I'm going to my ex-husband's. I'm not serving anything.
So why is that not like going to a
carrots.
Restaurant?
When we talk about roasted vegetables,
Why are you talking to Jamie about this? Why are you talking to
carrots.
Jamie? I thought we were talking.
Because he talked to me about our segment on roasted vegetables.
Well, that was an excellent segment.
And I'm not a very good cook, but I can roast some vegetables, and I thought, that's what I'll bring.
Can I quote Marjorie? Marjorie is so succinctly summarized essentially all we talk about when she said a minute ago, people have nut issues in their families. I think that is essentially the point we've been trying to make for years, actually. I don't think you're supposed to say that anymore because it's politically incorrect.
Listen to this. This is from Bryn in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Please ask people flying home for the holiday to be kind to their flight attendants. My nephew, one of most of our listeners, Jim, is a flight attendant and will be working on Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to all. Yeah, it's tough to have to work on Thanksgiving.
It is.
Yeah. People in the news business have to work on all these holidays. It's very, very sad.
You're working on? You're in the news business.
I am not. We are not working in the news business.
Okay,
But when I was
what do you mean?
Well, when I was a reporter, you either got Christmas off
well,
or you got
Thanksgiving off. You're not in the news business anymore? Is that what you're saying?
And a lot of people did not like to work on Thanksgiving. But
did you work on Thanksgiving? Oh, when you were a Cub-Ed reporter.
I did.
Sure
I worked on Thanksgiving many times.
Take a break here.
Oh, we're going to take a break.
No,
Okay.
but very few people are responding to the issue of the
travel
10,000 calorie limit, which I think should be the unofficial threshold.
I should point out before we go to the break that
Please.
according to AAA, the worst times to travel before Thanksgiving are Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 5 p.m.
And Tuesday.
And today from 1 to 7
well,
p.m.
do you need to know that from AAA?
I mean, no, I think a lot of people think the worst day to travel is on Thanksgiving
Well, they're
Day.
wrong, obviously.
And that actually is the day with the least amount of traffic.
So why did it take you 6 hours to get to Connecticut?
I don't know. That's an unanswered question. On Thanksgiving, I used to do it all in one day, 6 hours to Connecticut.
That's good.
It was pretty bad.
Why don't you tell us that story again after the break, okay? No, really, because I think repetition is really important for if you want people to remember that story.
Don't go to Connecticut. That would be my advice.
On Thursday.
If you can stay off
don't go to Connecticut anyway.
If you can stay off the Mass Pike, that would be my advice.
That's really good advice.
We're going to take more of your calls and texts coming up. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
We hope you'll be enjoying some special time with family and friends this Thanksgiving. While you're preparing the holiday meal, we'll be answering some of your culinary questions. Join Christopher Kimball for a Milk Street Thanksgiving, followed by Turkey Confidential, where host Francis Lamb will be assembling his round table of professional foodies. We're chefing it up Thanksgiving Day, starting at 11 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newport Mansions, presenting Sparkling Lights at the Breakers, one of Newport's most spectacular holiday traditions. A wonderland of color and light. Open through December 29th. Tickets at newportmansions.org. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, from Duke Ellington to Beethoven and Renee Fleming to Yo-Yo Ma. The BSO is where music lives. You can explore the full season at bso.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. 12:30, Ed Markey zooms in. Senator Markey just came back from Azerbaijan, COP29. 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, the Attorney General will be here, Andrea Campbell, to take your questions and ours. Our text segment of the day at 877-301-8970. Marjorie and Zoe this morning at our staff meeting were discussing all the important topics of the day, including whatever happened to the cornucopia, the symbol of harvest, allegedly, that every New England school kid drew every year around this time. Did anybody ever actually have one? And for those who are like me, what is a cornucopia? Text us your favorite cornucopia memories, what you stuff into them, and why you want one. 877-301-8970. We'll read some of those texts right
Haven't you noticed?
The 1 o'clock news.
They're not around anymore.
I didn't even know what it was until you said it this morning at the meeting.
That was a big thing at school, to draw the cornucopia.
That's great.
And it's a kind of a horn-shaped thing that opens at the end.
Okay, fine.
Stick
We're done
stuff
with that.
in there.
Okay, good.
But I haven't seen any around for a long time.
Oh, that's really sad. Now, right now, the lines are open about Thanksgiving travel and caloric intake at 877-301-8970.
A tire.
Oh, a tire.
Yeah.
That's another great one. AAA projects nearly 80 million people. I mean, who cares? Will travel domestically over Thanksgiving more than 50 miles. Are you one of them? Or do you forgo the hassle and just say, oops, sorry, I have COVID. I'll give you a call later. The number is 877-301-8970. And what are you doing? What are you wearing? And how much have you decided to eat in advance? Do you have a plan?
You know, Jim, ever since you mentioned that you used to wear Dickies when you were a kid, this has become an obsession with our listeners. We get Dickie texts every day. And today's is from Seth in Rhode Island, who says, Thanksgiving, Jim, is a good day for a Dickie and that robe around the Dickie.
By the way, that's exactly what I'm wearing to the restaurant, Seth. So that's exactly what I'm wearing. And an anonymous texter says, dear vegetarians and vegans, if you're so concerned about animals, stop eating their food. That's an argument I hadn't thought of. But let's take some calls, Marjorie.
Paula in Rhode Island, thank you for calling.
Hello, Paula.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a physician, and I am going to beg people to make sure that they drink plenty of fluids and eat more vegetables and fruits on Thanksgiving, because we often see people end up in the emergency room and hospital with bowel obstructions because they've been eating so much stuffing in Thanksgiving.
No, that is not true. Wait a second.
It's so true.
Bowel obstructions?
Every year. Yes, every year.
Okay. Is it the cornbread stuffing that's worse, or what?
What should we avoid,
kind of
Paula?
stuffing?
I think it's everything, but I don't think it's so much the things, but it's the amount and the variety. You know, you have to have stuffing and then have some cranberry sauce. You have to have turkey and have a bunch of green beans with it, and a lot of fluids with everything.
A lot of fluids, yeah.
Wow.
By the way, would you suggest to people that know that they're not going to abide by your rules to just have Thanksgiving dinner at the emergency room so they're there? Paula, that is really one of the most incredible calls, and I thank you. That's huge. I mean, it's one thing to overeat, but overeat and have a bowel obstruction on Thanksgiving.
How embarrassing would it be to spend your Thanksgiving in the emergency room?
Oh, why were you in the emergency room? Oh, I had a bowel obstruction. We generally don't use that kind of language on the show, but she's a doctor.
From eating too much stuffing.
Exactly.
You were overstuffed with stuffing.
That really is giving me pause, I have to say. That really is giving me pause.
Yeah.
That was a medical professional saying that.
Well, you're in the restaurant. I think the restaurant keeps you in bounds.
No, it does not.
It doesn't?
Because your attitude
is
I paid a ton of money.
Okay.
It's all you can eat. So you eat till you drop. This is not like a normal meal.
You're going to an all-you-can-eat?
Where else would I go? An all-you-can-eat buffet at Thanksgiving.
God. Okay. Susan in Attleboro, thank you for calling.
By the way, what they do is they've enlarged the door frames at the restaurant just for Thanksgiving, which I thought was very generous and consumer-centric. Hello, Susan. What's your deal?
Hey, I don't think I can top that last call.
No, that was a hell of a call there, yep.
But I just wanted to let you know I was out shopping, and there was tons of traffic. I couldn't figure out why. Mm-hmm. And I went by the turkey farm. And they were all in line waiting for the turkey, and the girl was out in the middle of the pen calling all the turkeys in. It was quite a sight to see.
Oh,
so they're buying live turkeys and then they have them killed to take them home?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sort of sad kind of thing. Susan, do you remember when Sarah Palin was running for vice president?
Oh, my God.
And she was doing a video, and she didn't realize she was on a turkey farm right behind her. It was Sarah Palin, right?
It was Sarah
Right
Palin.
behind her, they were lowering turkeys head first into like
a wood chipper.
A wood chipping,
It was
machine.
horrible.
It was really, I shouldn't have mentioned that
she's
either.
She's giving the interview, and the turkeys are right behind her with their little feet flapping above. It was horrible.
No bowel obstructions there, Susan.
But you know,
I don't think I'll be eating turkey after that.
I'm
Thanks,
sorry,
Jim.
I shouldn't have said it. Susan, thanks
well, no,
for the
apparently
call.
it's not true that turkeys don't drown in the rain. Remember there was that old wives' tale about how turkeys
because they just look up.
put their heads up and
How
they
do you
would
know
drown
that?
in the rain.
How do you know that?
I don't know. I read it was debunked. It isn't really true. But they do have those really weird snoods and caruncle things around their neck.
Which
you know,
is
those red
which
things.
exactly? Which is the one
I
under
don't know.
the
I
thing?
can't keep them straight. They
Read
have
Rob from Lowell. That's an interesting.
We mix Miralax into the stuffing to keep from getting obstructed. I never heard of this. I mean, maybe that one was.
She's a doctor.
Oh, that's what she said.
No,
I'm
please
suspicious.
don't
People are in the
disparage her.
emergency room.
You
on
can't say
Thanksgiving.
you don't think she's a doctor because you don't like what she had to say.
No, I just think it's odd. Have you ever heard of that? People
Yes,
in the
I
emergency
have.
room eat
Yes,
George
I have.
stuffing on Thanksgiving.
Yes, I have.
Beth in Lexington, thank you for calling.
Hello there, Beth.
Hi, first-time caller.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking me.
Thank you.
I listened to a few callers ago, who was telling her woes of going to a vegan Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I remember that.
And my disappointment was to hear the host, particularly Marjorie.
It was Marjorie, yeah.
Agreeing with her about how terrible
That was
that there's no
Marjorie.
butter and no ice cream.
Yeah.
I do not serve a vegetarian or vegan Thanksgiving,
What
but
do you
I
do?
serve a wonderful kosher Thanksgiving.
Oh, so no butter,
There
right?
is no ice cream, no butter, no whipped cream. But my table, I've been doing this for 25 years for extended family and friends, and the coveted friends are so lucky they get to come. And you don't have to have dairy to have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
So let's be honest here. Were you offended by Marjorie's comments? I was. Were you offended?
Well, I felt that it was ridiculing those of us who eat a kosher lifestyle.
Listen, I don't think it was the kosher lifestyle so much. I think she was ridiculing the non-butter world. She's a butter-centric woman. Beth, thank you for the call, though.
We're big in the baked potatoes. You know, the Irish are big in the baked potatoes. And what do you put on baked potatoes? Just slather them with butter.
Can I just tell you right now, do not read Paul from Fort Lauderdale, even though it's the funniest text of the day.
No,
we are not
we're not
reading
gonna
it.
read it. Okay.
Paul, we just want you to know that it is really funny. But I think we like our jobs a little bit too much to be reading that one. 877-301-8970. Now, Caroline from Dedham is calling about something that is supposed to be the text topic at 12:55.
But nonetheless,
But
go
why
ahead.
not? You want to talk cornucopia. We're really glad you did, Caroline. Welcome to the show. Hi.
In the spirit of the holiday, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
Cornucopia.
Yeah.
So my mom had 2 crystal cornucopia, beautiful Hi-C crystal cornucopia, and she stuffed them with fruit and nuts and put them in the middle of the dining room table when we were having hors d'oeuvres.
Wow.
And I still have them, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Now, have you noticed, though, Caroline, I don't see them much in stores or on centerpieces anymore. What happened?
Oh, you know, this is old school. This is when people set a beautiful table and everything was cloth.
Yeah.
And, really nice silver and china and things like that. And, a lot of folks don't do that anymore.
What is the history? What's the historical significance of the cornucopia? I'm sure, Mark, you don't know, right?
I have a story about them.
Oh, you do? Well, I don't want you to read a story. I'd like to have it spontaneous here.
But it's supposed to be from Greek times.
Caroline, do you know anything about the history, the genesis of this, or no?
No, I don't know the
it's
history,
okay,
but
it's fine.
I know it, symbolizes plenty.
A thing of plenty, right.
Yes,
Caroline,
yes.
thank you. Thank you for updating us.
Thank you very
We
much,
appreciate it.
Caroline. And Caroline did mention setting a nice table. Lots of people. I mean, I've had a few holidays with, paper plates.
Well, you really are traditionalist.
I'm not. I
mean,
didn't do the paper plates.
No, I just said you're a traditionalist.
Yes.
And by the way, I admire that. I'm not criticizing
Do
you
you
at all.
like paper plates for holiday
I
dinners?
like paper plates and paper cups.
They're
I find it really attractive.
They're very bad for the
And I
environment.
also like plastic utensils which break when you're trying to cut through whatever. What is this?
Our staff just showed us a picture of a naked Zeus with it holding his horn of plenty. See the picture?
Is that where it comes from, Zeus?
Yeah. I think it's...
He's using the cornucopia to cover his you-know-what. You notice that there? That's where it comes from. Is the
Okay. 877-301-8970.
No, I think we've had enough. I think we've really had enough.
The Marchioness de Chambly. Did you read that one?
No, I would like you to.
I can't pronounce that anymore, but she was the one that was supposedly carrying on with someone. Was she in the British?
Yeah, who
royalty?
was she carrying on with? Jamie, who was she carrying on with? I can't remember.
It was William, wasn't it? William,
Somebody.
But it wasn't true. It wasn't true.
And the anonymous texter says she loves Dickies, which I guess is the point there.
That's right. She loves Dickies, and she was going to have Thanksgiving with the Marchioness de Chambly, who was supposedly carrying on with Prince William, but we don't think that's true at all. Okay. Anyway, we're moving on to sports. We're going to talk to Trenni Casey up next. She's from NBC Sports Boston, NBC 10 Sports Boston. Yeah,
it's okay. I mean, she does something somewhere is the bottom line.
Okay, NBC Sports Boston.
That is correct.
That's Trenni Casey.
Okay.
She's an anchor reporter. She's going to be with us up next.
Yeah,
I get it confused because Sue O'Connell also works there.
NBC 10. Well,
she's
not.
The longest suspension bridge ever built will soon connect the island of Sicily to mainland Italy. It's been a long time coming.
I mean, everybody knows that this has been talked about for decades. I think that most people are skeptical that it would never happen.
We'll find out why it took so long next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Boston Ballet, presenting The Nutcracker. Beloved characters, luminous dancing, and Tchaikovsky's memorable score will enchant audiences of all ages this holiday season. On stage beginning November 29th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan with Medicare Advantage plans featuring a new flexible benefits card to cover fitness and weight loss programs, healthcare transportation, and over-the-counter healthcare needs. mgbadvantage.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Senator Markey, who just came back from Azerbaijan and COP29, the climate conference, worldwide climate conference, will zoom in at 12:30. 1 to 2, the Attorney General Andrea Campbell will be with us to answer our questions and yours. Tomorrow, we haven't seen him in a while. Andres Nelson's celebrating his 10th anniversary as the lead guy at the BSO, and he is one of the most wonderful people on the planet beyond his talent. I mean, just as a person. Our text segment today at 877-301-8970 is simply put this way. Marjorie is wondering, what happened to the cornucopia? Did you have one? And as I said, until that caller made, what is a cornucopia? You can text us with your favorite cornucopia memories and what you stuff it with and that sort of thing. We're joined now at the desk by Trenni Casey. She's an anchor reporter for something like NBC Sports Boston and a PR contributor. It's great to see you, Trenni. Welcome.
What's a cornucopia?
Exactly.
Are you serious? I love this.
Exactly.
There are two of us who didn't know what it was.
I thought it was like a cornucopia. Don't you usually use it as like an array of different things?
Yeah, but apparently it comes from a corn. What is it? A horn of something or whatever?
I do remember
Horn of plenty.
It kind of looks like like a big seashell, but then you put like I've seen one before.
Yeah. There it is.
Why?
I'll hold it up.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I would text in if I were you for our 12:55 segment.
Okay. So
why I'm here right now.
That's a very good point, by the way, which I'll think about when I get back to you.
There has been a big brouhaha about volleyball teams, college volleyball teams. A lot of them have taken forfeits rather than play against San Jose State University because they have a trans woman on the team. A judge has said that trans player is entitled to compete. So we'll see what happens. But what is the backstory here?
So the backstory is that San Jose State has a player who identifies as transgender. We should note that she has not publicly spoken. She has not come out and said that she is transgender. Her teammates intimate that she is. In fact, the co-captain of this team was part of the lawsuit. Trying to bar her from playing. But here's what I find most interesting. And listen, I always try to be really sensitive about this because I think it's really easy to get caught in your corner when it comes to transgender sports participation, particularly when we're talking about biological males who now identify as female. There is a biological difference between female athletes and male athletes. There are reasons that there are standards that are different, right? And so I can empathize as a female athlete with other female athletes and their families who are worried about a competition level, a competitive level that gets squished. To be honest, though, numbers say that hasn't been flushed out yet. There's just not enough transgender kids participating in sports that it has had a widespread negative effect on female athletes. But again, there should be parameters in place so that biological women aren't suffering to make everyone else feel equal, right? I think there are ways to do it. But with that said, there should also be rules in place that transgender kids have a chance to participate and identify at the gender that they want, that they feel comfortable in, and not feel ostracized in society. It does not need to be black or white. There is a gray area. And I think that it takes a really nuanced conversation and not to just get in your corner and yell at everyone. I also think there's a big difference between a transgender athlete, male transitioning to female, competing in individual sports versus what we're talking about here, which is a volleyball team.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really important point of the story to point out. This player that is under question has been a member of the San Jose State volleyball team since 2022, which means that this is either her second or third season in college volleyball. The previous 2 seasons, not one of these teams said anything. They competed against her. In fact, in the original story I read in the Washington Post, one of the athletic directors said they had no competitive edge. The San Jose State team had no competitive edge with her competing as a transgender athlete.
Well, she's not even supposed to be as good as some of the women on the team.
She's not.
Yeah.
She's not a top-notch player.
Right.
But all of a sudden, this year,
it's politics.
In September, yes, when I believe people were given license once again to discriminate against transgender kids, suddenly this is an issue. So for 2 years, all of these teams, all of these players played against this team. There was no pushback on it. And then all of a sudden in September of 2024, now they don't like that this transgender athlete has played on this team. Now it's a problem. Now they're forfeiting games. To me, it is disingenuous. It is political. It is hurtful. It is not because this person is affecting the competition on the court. It is simply because they have been given license to push back and discriminate against transgender kids who are some of the most vulnerable kids in our community, and I think it's disgusting.
Well, I'm so glad you said this latter part, because I want to say something, and then hopefully we'll move on here. The analogy to me is what you said during this campaign, Marjorie, about 10,000 times. All we talk about is the horse race, not the important issues.
Right.
The argument in these litigations against having a transgender person participate in a women's sport, and Seth Moulton obviously got involved in this too, the congressman. We had him on the show right after he made the comments to the New York Times and to our colleague Mark Hers in the morning. It is I accept that there are people of goodwill who think they or their daughters are discriminated against. Let's start with that. The number of people who fall into that category is infinitesimally small. So the decision we as members of American society and the media have to decide, considering there are groups of people discriminated against for thousands of reasons, the vast majority of whom are far greater in numbers than the number of women athletes who are discriminated against because a transgender woman is swimming or running, is so infinitesimally small that we have to make a decision as people and as journalists about whether or not we're going to continue to highlight this thing, which in my opinion totally plays into the Trumpian world. Again, I respect people who in goodwill feel their kid or they were discriminated against, but let's put it in context in a world in which there's a lot of horrible discrimination against far more people than this.
And we should point out that in this New York Times article that discusses the ruling from the judge who said this athlete can continue to compete, it says in some sports like track and field, transgender women are essentially barred from competing in women's competitions. And I believe that is to protect the female athletes you're talking about, right? Like, let's get more data. Let's figure out what happens when maybe a teenager or a young adult starts to take hormonal therapy. I think we're still in the infancy stages of figuring out how that treatment affects the testosterone, their muscle mass, their speed, their power, all of which we have to acknowledge are different between men and women, and that's okay. But I think that it's complicated. And I think someone like Charlie Baker, I think someone like him is probably trying to do the best that he can to make it fair for everyone. And I just think that too often we get in our corners and it's like, it's black or it's white when there's a lot of gray area nuance.
I want to add one more thing to what I said, and then we're done with this for today and hopefully for a while, is not only is the volume of discrimination, assuming it exists in some settings, infinitesimally small, again, particularly compared to other kinds of discrimination that I would say are voluminous.
And you're talking about the discrimination against cisgendered female athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I assume there's some, I mean, that swimmer at my alma mater, Penn, obviously she was ranked 500th, I think, before transitioning. Now she's one of the greatest swimmers in the world. I mean, you can make the case there. However, not only do I feel strongly about what I said a minute ago about the context and consequence of this and how small the impact is, secondly, it feeds the pain that is visited upon. I listened to your interview with Alejandra Carballo when I was out the other day. The pain and discrimination and fear that is instilled in trans people who are just trying to live their lives because people have decided in this society, let's go after the most vulnerable part of our population. I think we have a higher obligation than playing that game.
One of the things, I'm glad you mentioned Alejandra Carballo. People might know she's a civil rights attorney. She teaches at Harvard Law School. She's a trans woman, and we had her on the show last week. And one of the things she said, too, we talked about this, back when we were all fighting about gay rights, initially 20 years ago, a lot of people said that the people that were most ready for gay marriage or more protections for gay were people who knew someone that's gay. Very few people know someone that's gay. I mean, that's trans.
Transgender.
So we talked about the idea that there needs to be some kind of understanding, because I think to some people they see that and they think of some 6'4" person against some 5'2" woman, and they think, my goodness, this doesn't seem fair, and that there's a lot
Pick on somebody who's a greater threat to your life.
I know.
I mean, it's just cruelty.
But that's what happens. There's not a lot of understanding about the lives of trans people.
Well, let's talk about that. Instead of a volleyball player, I'm not criticizing any of us. It was a big story. Instead of a volleyball player who's the captain of her team, who's offended that she has to play with an inferior athlete who happens to be trans.
But during this election, when that anti-trans ad was played continually there wasn't a discussion of this in a real way. It was just,
and that's the problem, because
that really harmed things.
I also don't like, Zoe, your producer and I were talking about this off air, where it is infinitesimally small right now, the number of trans athletes, but hopefully, I hope we continue, and we'll see, to live in a society where people feel comfortable being who they are, which might lead to more people being openly transgender. It's always existed. It's always existed in not just our society, but societies across the world. But just now, I think people are comfortable coming forward. So there may be an issue going forward where this does become an issue of fairness. And as a female, I feel like, women shouldn't have to suffer.
Okay,
right?
And when
like
that moment happens, we'll discuss it.
But there should be, doesn't mean we can't work to get rules in place. I just don't like demonizing a group of people who are already marginalized and constantly feel demonized to try and raise your thing up. Like, I just feel like there's always a better, more thoughtful way to talk about these issues than always demonizing people and making someone else the enemy. It just, I mean, I guess it works. We saw it worked in the election. Demonizing people worked. I wish it wouldn't work because it's not the right way to go about it.
We're talking to Trenni Casey from NBC Sports Boston.
Okay, so, a lot of people, after they win championships, Patriots, the Celtics, they go down to the White House to celebrate with the president that's in office. The Celtics are going.
They did. They went last week.
Yeah, that's right. They just went, and I guess it was a great day. The players thought it was a wonderful day. But one of the stories in the Globe said the Celtics might be the last team to visit the White House because previous NBA players, when Trump was president, didn't go.
Yeah, no NBA team, and I don't believe any WNBA team who won a title during the last Trump presidency, the last 4 years, ever visited the White House. I think it was probably for obvious reasons. The NBA and WNBA are two of the most liberal and diverse minority majority sports leagues next to the NFL. We saw a lot of pushback even in the NFL. There were some black players who chose not to go on other football teams and I think actually there was a football team, it might have been the Eagles.
It was.
Who didn't go at all.
Actually, a few said they weren't going, and then I think Trump canceled them.
Yes.
Because he was so offended that a few individuals decided, I don't want to go.
So he just pulled the rug under and said, no one's going to go. If you guys don't all want to come, nobody gets to come. But this is going to be, what's going to be interesting to me is, and I think we had this story in our packet last week and we just didn't get to it. But, people now are less vocally anti-Trump. People who were anti-Trump in 2016 and 2020 have moved further to the right. So I wonder if it will be such a culture issue like it was in 2016 to 2020 when he was president. That to me is a really interesting thing to watch. I think the NBA will probably always be that way. But maybe not. Maybe we will see an NBA team go to the White House. I have a hard time believing an NBA team.
Football players different.
Yeah, football players are different. Baseball players definitely different. But I am curious if there is any movement on political pushback from athletes that we saw in the first run of this administration that won't be there for the second. One, because again, just numbers say the country at least has shifted, I think not quite as drastically to the right as we first thought when the numbers came out. But two, I also wonder if people are worried about retaliation and they're worried about if they push back too much, what happens to them. If you're a wealthy, star athlete, do you feel like you can speak out against this administration in the same way you did the first time around? Or are you worried that there will be some sort of retribution? Do you feel safe that your family would be safe, that you wouldn't get audited in your taxes? It might not be something. I was reading a really interesting article about the type of retribution. I think we all think about people fleeing the country or, feeling like they might, be taken out violently like they are in Russia. But just the threat of a lawsuit against someone, what that does to your family, to your pocketbook, all of those make people fall in line. And I am curious to see if athletes feel this pressure to fall in line, or maybe not fall in line, but say nothing so that they can protect themselves and their families.
By the way, this only becomes a big thing when there's a president who decides to make it a big thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. When the Bruins won the Stanley Cup last time, the star goalie, who was the key player, he's a very conservative guy. He didn't go.
Because it was Barack Obama.
It was mentioned in local papers. End of discussion. He chose not to go. Barack Obama didn't say, well, then none of the Bruins are coming. How dare you?
Well, he's an adult.
The guy made an independent political decision, which I totally support, even if I disagree with it. Yeah. End of discussion. It's only the person who, if you ever cross him, has got to make a huge deal. Can we talk? Go ahead.
I was just going to mention this great column by this sports columnist in the Washington Post, Kevin Blackstone, who talked about how Trump should stay out of sports altogether. And he says in his piece, there is nothing in the values of sports that aligns with those exhibited by Trump. There is no regard for meritocracy or deference to rules, no respect for the ideal of fair play or for impartial arbitrators, and maybe most starkly, no respect for the peaceful acceptance of defeat. I thought that was a great job.
Yeah, but he loves, what's one of the first things he did? He went to a UFC fight. One of the first things Trump did within the week and a half after getting elected, he loves being in that spotlight. Remember, he used Mike Pence as sort of a pawn to go to a Colts game in Indianapolis,
Pence is from Indiana.
And if any players, this was while everyone was kneeling, right? Remember, Colin Kaepernick started kneeling during the national anthem because he felt that it wasn't representative of all people of the United States, and then other athletes started following suit. And Trump was running for president, I believe, at the time, or maybe he was president at the time, and there was a moment where Mike Pence went to a Colts game and then players kneeled and he walked out. And everyone knew it was sort of like this pre-planned protest. But they love to use, listen, the NFL football still to this day is, it's still the most watched thing. While people are falling away from all these other television programs and branching off, everyone still watches football. So it's hard for me to believe that he is going to just sort of leave sports alone, that it's not going to be a continuous target to try and the NFL is a good one because it's easy to pit people against each other, right? Like, a lot of your fans are white and a lot of your players are black. And it's just a very simple way to
almost all the owners are white, and a lot of them are very conservative.
Yes, and billionaires, yes.
So as long as we're talking about sports, I can't see the clock. We got about 6 minutes left there.
4.
I can't
4 minutes left. Okay, real quick. There's a story in here about the NBA is too many three-pointers, and they're talking, and it is true.
And you know what? Last night the Celtics hit 12 and a quarter. It was like a record. I laughed because I was watching the game and I thought, oh my God, we just said this story. It's. I don't know that it's ruining the game.
It's changing it,
but it's changing it dramatically. Like Remember when we used to have like thunderous dunks and there was actually passing and pick and roll?
Good passing. I agree.
And like a nice little floater in the lane. Like you see a floater in the lane now and you're like, what just happened? I can't believe it. It's just constant barrage of like the longer the three, the better. And listen, part of that has been great, right? It's sort of the Steph Curryification of the NBA. And now it's bled into, I mean, that's the whole reason Caitlin Clark is kind of exploded onto the scene. She was able to make those things, they're called the logo three, right? Because the logo's in the middle of the court. She'd be so far behind the three-point line, and then she'd make this three-pointer. Peyton Pritchard, like that's one of the
Celtics.
He's a Celtics player, comes off the bench. Possibly, maybe right now looks like he might be in the running for 6th man of the year, but it's early. Like one of his signature plays is clock is winding down. He's half court. He heaves it up. He makes it. The whole place goes crazy. But it's kind of taken away from the flow of the game.
And also, just one thing: when the game is really close and it's near the end of the game, why they just don't go for the two that they're going to make?
I know. It's sort of a three that they're going to miss.
Yes,
I
it
know.
drives me
Listen to
insane.
you.
Well, I like the
You're
Celtics.
a huge basketball fan.
I like
so
watching
you are.
basketball. I like watching.
You want to talk about offensive linemen now? Just kidding. No, I agree, Marjorie. Like, you have this opportunity to drive the lane.
Yeah.
This is probably getting a little too inside sports maybe for the public radio crowd.
okay.
But, okay, if you're like, let's say you're down 2. You're down 2 and you want to win the game. So you're going to maybe try to shoot a three-pointer. But you know what you could also do? Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you could drive the lane hard, draw a foul, make the easy layup, then make your free throw, and suddenly you won the game the same way. It's a 3-point play. It just looks a little different.
Yeah.
But it's just they don't do it anymore.
And it's cliche and ridiculous to say, but why not say it, Marjorie? When they get them, it's great, but when they miss them, you're so annoyed
I
because
know.
you think you could have taken the easy shot, and instead of this, you're behind the line and you miss it.
I know.
So anyway,
I know. But the Celtics
They've
are
gone
doing
too
great. They
far.
won
That's
again
like
last
the
night.
biggest emotional investment you've had in an issue
Marjorie
since November 5th.
She does love the Celtics.
She does.
It's that and cornucopias. That's what, my...
Do you have a cornucopia at
I
your
do not.
house?
I have not seen a cornucopia in years. We're going to talk about it with our listeners. What happens to the cornucopias? They seem to have disappeared.
We're
very upset about it.
Really is upsetting. Before you go, you have 30 seconds. Are the Patriots the worst Patriots team in the history of the Patriots?
Well, I haven't been around long enough to know if
However,
it's the worst, but it's certainly the worst since I've been here. They're so hard to watch. I fell asleep during the fourth quarter.
That was horrible. I watched most of that. I'm embarrassed to say. It was just
I was
abysmal.
out cold. I was like, this is terrible.
That's what I'm going to be Thursday, out cold. So in any case...
No, they don't play on Thursday. They don't get any primetime games.
I'm not talking about that. It's Thanksgiving. I'm eating. Hey, Trenni
But
Casey,
don't
it's great
eat
to
some
see you.
vegetables. You don't want any bowel obstructions.
God, that was
good
so
point.
horrible.
That was the doctor. Doctor's talking doctor.
Okay. We've been speaking.
Thank you,
Happy
Trenni.
Thanksgiving, guys.
You too. We've been speaking with Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and Boston Public Radio contributor. Thank you very much, Trenni. Coming up after the new news, Jack Smith, the prosecutor. His investigations into Trump are over, at least for a while. We'll talk about it with our national security expert, Juliette Kayyem. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. Frontline examines the rise of Xi Jinping, his vision for China, and the global implications. Don't miss China, the U.S., and the rise of Xi Jinping, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News.
25% on goods coming from Canada and Mexico. He says the duty will help reduce the amount of drugs such as fentanyl that enter the United States. Trump also argues the tariffs will deter illegal migration. Here's NPR's Elena Moore.
Trump made the announcement in a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, saying the tariffs would go into effect on January 20th, Inauguration Day. The 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, along with the 10% tariff on goods from China, a source of illegal drugs, are not totally unexpected threats. Trump campaigned heavily on imposing stricter tariffs and made similar moves during his first term as president. That said, it's a decision that some economists argue could end up hurting U.S. shoppers at home. Elena Moore, NPR News, Washington.
Israel and Hezbollah militants continue to exchange fire, even as officials from Lebanon and Israel work on conditions for a ceasefire. NPR's Lauren Frayer has more from Beirut.
Explosions echo.
The Air Force says its defense has intercepted most of the drones, but Ukraine says some critical infrastructure sites such as the Medicare and Medicaid. The Biden administration is proposing a new rule to expand coverage. NPR's Sydney Lupkin has details.
Many people who rely on Medicare and Medicaid for their health insurance do not have access to popular medications that treat obesity. That's because of decades-old legislation that specifically excludes drugs for weight gain, weight loss, and anorexia from mandatory coverage. The Biden administration says it is proposing a rule to remedy that for people with obesity, expanding access to an estimated 3.4 million people on Medicare and 4 million people on Medicaid. Currently, the drugs are only required to be covered if the patient also has cardiovascular disease because they can reduce the risk of a heart attack. It's unclear, however, if the proposed rule will become finalized in the incoming Trump administration. Sydney Lupkin, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 144 points. You're listening to NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Striking teachers met with Governor Maura Healey at the State House this morning as schools remain shuttered in Beverly and Marblehead for a third week. Teachers are seeking the governor's support as state-led fact-finding gets underway. Negotiators appear to be far apart on higher wages for paraprofessionals. The co-president of the Beverly Teachers Union and the city's mayor disagree over the school committee's decision to dock teachers' pay.
Cutting off pay right before Thanksgiving and the upcoming holidays is clearly a tactic designed to bully educators and force the BTA back to work without a living wage for paraprofessionals.
Nobody here for a second wants to withhold a bit of anyone's pay, but we're stuck.
Meantime, families in Beverly and Marblehead are wondering when their children can go back to school. Harvard University students stepped up to the plate before leaving campus for Thanksgiving. Volunteers repackaged nearly 4,000 pounds of leftover food from the dining halls so it can be distributed to residents across the Boston area experiencing food insecurity. Krista Martin is with the Harvard University Dining Services.
We have lots of beautiful, healthy, freshly cooked food, and there's inevitably a little bit left over at the end of every day, and we wanted it to continue to support our community.
Students partnered up with the nonprofit Food for Free to help feed Boston residents. We've got umbrella weather on the way here in Massachusetts. Showers, highs in the 40s this afternoon. Freezing rain is forecast for New Hampshire for the next hour or so. Right now, it's 45 degrees in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Senator Ed Markey is going to zoom in at 12:30, and between 1 and 2 we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. And tomorrow we'll be back here with Andres Nelson, who is the music director of the BSO. Hello again, Jim.
And the new president of the BSO, who we haven't had on the show since
that's right.
ascended to the position. You want to tell people about the tech segment?
Oh, our tech segment of the day at 877-301-8970. is based on a rumination, actually, between me and Zoe this morning, our producer, wondering whatever happened to the Thanksgiving cornucopia.
Yep.
Where are they? Did you have one? Where did they go? What did you do with the one you used to have? Text us your favorite cornucopia thoughts, and we'll attempt to turn this fruitful topic, or plastic fruit topic, as it turns out, into a segment a little bit before the 1 o'clock news. Juliette is laughing here about the cornucopias. Do you have any particular thoughts of the cornucopia?
I'm just thinking like my prep. I'm reading articles, making sure I know everything that's going on, and you and Zoe are talking about
cornucopia.
You got to be prepared for something.
I'm done.
In any case, we're joined now.
Important issues.
Thank you. We're joined now by national security expert Juliette Kayyem. She's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer for The Atlantic. Juliette, before we get to the news of the day, which you said we were ignoring a minute ago, our staff was able to find some tape of your escapades this past weekend. Let's take a listen. Here it is.
The battle is between Gasly and Sainz, and they open the door for Charles Leclerc to go from 4th, potentially to 2nd. There's no grip off line. Ferrari versus Ferrari, and around the outside to take P2 goes the man 4th on the grid.
Okay, that's nice. What the hell is that, and where were you? What is that?
Oh my God, they're all laughing
What
at me.
is it?
So
You're turning red,
I
so
do,
obviously this was a hell of a
I get
contract.
hired to help Formula One with their Las Vegas Grand Prix. Let me just be clear. I was doing 18-hour days
I'm
of
sure
work.
it's really tough.
At 4 a.m. on Sunday morning, I had my first drink of the weekend. But I help, I help with mega event planning and. But
what are you adding oil to the cars?
Yeah, totally.
What do you do?
It's the tires. I do the tires.
Fine.
I just follow cute drivers around. No, I do. It has a big footprint, and there's a lot going on, from drones to cars catching on fire and various other things.
Well,
and lots of people there, so you worry about crowd crush and stuff. But it was super fun, very successful. Little blips here and there, and I posted, I guess, on Instagram, and your team.
Maybe they did. By the way, let me just say, it's not just you. Marjorie actually has a history in Formula One racing too.
Oh, that's right.
Here's some sound from one of her championship races. Here it is.
He is moving like a tremendous machine.
Yes.
Marjorie was in charge of security for that.
Secretariat.
At the Belmont.
My favorite movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a Disney movie.
Secretariat? It's your favorite.
It's very sappy. It's a Disney movie. But what can I say, Juliette?
Okay.
No,
it's really sad.
It's like.
No, I know
It's
as
like
sad
a love
as it sounds.
story between a horse.
That's right.
Yeah, but the owner of the horse, Penny, whatever her name is, went to
Penny
Smith.
Chaney.
That's part of her deal.
Well, it's not just that. It's about.
I'm turning my back to
Here we
you.
go.
It's about
That's
the early feminist movement, how she was
That's
dismissed.
a good point, actually. No women owners.
Because she was a woman and she picked the best racehorse. She picked it, the best racehorse ever to hit the turf.
This
Anyway.
is what the Smith girls tell
Do
me.
you know that, by the way, this is little known fact.
What?
When Secretariat crossed the finish line, the Belmont, largest margin in history.
Oh, you got to watch
he
it
was
online.
eating a cornucopia. Do you know that? Literally, as he walked across.
Okay,
around
Juliette,
across.
if you haven't seen it, you got to Google when you leave here. Secretariat Belmont race, and you will be in tears.
Yeah, okay. That's enough of that.
I guess maybe not.
Okay.
Anyway, to get back to the depressing news of the day. We all saw what happened on January 6th.
Yes.
We knew about the documents being taken from the White House to Mar-a-Lago and various other places. Jack Smith was the prosecutor in charge of those cases, and where are we now?
They're done. Jack Smith is wrapping up to close out the investigation. That is because that's for two reasons, but the main one is the Supreme Court has basically said that a president really. You can't go after a president while he's president, and the Department of Justice is interpreting, or has in the past, interpreted that rather broadly, that a sitting president can't be indicted and you can't get anything done before January 20th. So he's closing up, and that investigation is, I think it's.
That's not a Supreme Court thing. That's an internal rule,
That's
right?
an internal. So you have the Supreme Court that
with the immunity decision,
that he's immune
the scope,
from anything that's going on when he's president, and then you have the DOJ interpretation of that. So that piece is done as well. I mean, so that nothing's left.
Don't we hope that after he's no longer president, assuming he does leave,
that can be reopened?
If it's within, if the 5-year statute of limitation, but the question is, when does the 5-year thing start?
No, the question is not when it starts. The question is, does it toll? Is it on hold during the 4 years?
Term.
Because otherwise, more than 5 years will have run.
Yeah,
obviously,
that's what I was going to explain.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay.
And the question is in the interim. I mean, a couple things are going to happen. I mean, first is, does he go after Jack Smith under some theory of whatever? He'll find one, and what happens with that case, and how the Department of Justice, now likely to be led by the former Attorney General of Florida, how likely the Department of Justice will go after people under Jack Smith,
including people who are lifelong
Trump has said
civil servants.
He'll do it. Yeah. I mean, he's on. This is we're at the nothing should make your jaw drop stage of this. I mean, he's going to go out. He's going to say he's going to go after lots of people. We don't know what's actually going to happen when he's in. Pam Bondi, who was the Attorney General of Florida, likely I won't say that actually. We don't know what shoes are going to drop, but if confirmed, will be the Attorney General, unlikely to be anything but doing his bidding.
She's an election denier in addition to everything else. She was part of the litigation, part of the impeachment trial the second time.
You know what I wonder?
I know her. And I had I rarely have uncomfortable moments on air, but it was after the Pulse killing, and Anderson Cooper had her with me. Because she's very anti-LGBTQ rights, and so he was asking her whether from her position being anti-gay essentially contributes to a hate environment. People will remember a couple dozen men were killed at a gay nightclub in Florida, and I'm just standing there. I'm sure I can find the clip at some stage, and he's just going after her. I mean, he was and she's not smart enough to sort of be nimble if attacks, so she just sort of falls into like a smile and a sort of bubbliness. It was just the weirdest situation, and she's and that's sort of been her persona well before Trump. I mean, also this was before Trump.
The question, he's threatened to go after Jack Smith and anybody and to investigate the quote fraud from 2020, which obviously he won't give up on. And while in a moment of sanity, you say he's not going to get far, not you, one says not going to get very far. I don't see any reason he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
When you see the CBS News poll where 59% have a favorable view of the transition, while we're all talking about these unqualified women abusing candidates, American people are perfectly fine. We'll talk about mass deportation in a minute. They're perfectly fine with that too. Why would they not be fine if he stands up and says, these people violated the rule of law, they unconstitutionally went after me, and Attorney General Bondi is prosecuting all of them, and they win their case in 4 years when they've depleted all their savings. And
well, that's what I'm wondering about, depleting all their savings part. You wonder, will the Department of Justice represent them in these cases?
Represent who?
The people that are gone after by Trump.
No, of course not.
No.
It's under Pam Bondi and Donald Trump.
Then I would hope
I will tell you, part of the preparation stage is lots of law firms are already, I know this because I have friends who are at these law firms have already been contacted, potentially, not Jack Smith specifically, but others who worry that they are going to be prosecuted, and a lot of law firms are going to do this pro bono.
Thank God. Because Trump, like $50 million he spent so far on his legal fees. Who can afford that? And he hasn't paid it himself, obviously.
Campaign funds.
And Giuliani is now in court saying he has nothing. So.
Sending them money. So that's what I fear, is that they will not have the legal talent to protect them and will not be able to pay those bills. So
but beyond that, even if you know you're right, and even if you have financial support, being dragged through the courts for years, being charged with crimes, not really by the Attorney General, but by the President of the United States, is a pretty torturous thing for anybody. And I think it's going to happen.
And he's going to reopen, he has said that he is going to reopen an investigation into 2020 because he somehow feels now that somehow, he's going to prove voter fraud in 2020 because he can never admit that he has lost. And it's going to be, look, I know there's no silver lining on a lot of this. It is just going to be brace yourself and also let it rip. On this tariff stuff, that's brilliant. You're such a brilliant mastermind. You're gonna go after our two largest importers and think it's not going to impact consumers. He's already walking away from it this morning with exceptions and this and that and this and that.
In any case, we're talking to Juliette Kayyem. Can we move on to this? I'm sorry, you go ahead.
To the aid, I was going to mention.
No, you go right ahead.
I was just going to mention this aid because I sound like I'm being very sexist, but I guess maybe I am being very sexist. Pam Bondi looks a lot like a Barbie doll, if you saw the movie.
Yes.
That's not fair.
And she does. And this woman that Trump is very close to, apparently, in his office, this aide of his, a 33-year-old former far-right cable host, a woman named Natalie Harp. She also looks very much like Barbie. It's the same kind of blonde, long hair and stuff like that. But this is a weird relationship. They talk in this piece by the New York Times, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, about this 33-year-old woman, Ms. Harp, has at times jogged behind the president's golf cart to inform him of the latest breaking stuff on some of these right-wing websites, which she gives to him, and then sometimes they post them right away on Truth Social without vetting him. Here's what she said about Trump. She told the president, "You are all that matters to me." She said, I don't ever want to let you down. She calls him her guardian and protector in this life. And she told Mr. Trump in another one of these letters she sent to him, she wants to get back, quote, that synergy, unquote, that used to be there where we talk about everything and nothing. And I want to bring you joy, to feel like we can get through a day without ever having to talk work. Now, the reason
I want to bring you joy.
This matters.
What a 70-plus-year-old man doesn't want to hear that from a 30-year-old?
She's a beautiful young woman.
I was in Las Vegas too long.
But the thing that's scary about this is not necessarily what she said about him, which is kind of weird, but that she is handing him all this
so she's
baloney. It's not true, non-vetted stuff, which she is then posting and making unfounded accusations.
Right. So she's basically Gateway Pundit, which is just like, if you've ever watched this sort of this conspiratorial website. Donald Trump likes knowing what's happening in that world in order to manipulate what's going on. I mean, he's the conduit between that world and sort of the reality-based world. I personally believe that Donald Trump does keep track of mainstream media. He likes to know what those people are thinking. The New York Times. He's always
he wants to be validated.
Right, and if the Atlantic has a bad story, goes after the Atlantic. So he has his feet firmly in that world. But the people he surrounds himself with, in particular, the conduit of paper, right, the person who's going to be feeding him information or closest to him physically in the White House, is clearly someone who doesn't have her feet in reality. And I think that's going to be true throughout the agencies. And so the question is that, is what reality are they basing their judgments off of? So you can imagine the Gateway Pundit says, taking vitamin D will cure cancer, right, or whatever it is. Or will stop the next pandemic. There's a lot of stuff going around right now, and then Donald Trump repeats that. That's a benign one, and repeats it from the stage. That's the challenge here, and that's going to be the pressure on how we communicate in this age to people who may only choose a sliver of what that information is. I don't have a good answer for it. I mean, it is. Look, there's going to be a certain group of people who are choosing that, and
by the way,
that's
can I
going
tell
to
you
be the
something?
reality.
Margie doesn't give a damn about the policy implications of this.
Yeah.
Margie comes in, she says to me, "Did you see the story in the New York Times? This 30-year-old blonde kid is running after Donald Trump's golf cart on the golf course." That's what she wants to talk about.
Well,
I mean, and it is rather odd. Yes.
Odd. I mean, it is. I mean, it's. Look, the Atlantic had a headline, so I'm going to quote it, but called the Me Too Cabinet, which is fair, I think, in terms of the sexual allegations, the various. I think real reports against a variety of cabinet choices, and now with Gates, at least former cabinet choices. The Me Too, though, is also reflected, I think, in some of the women that Trump surrounds himself with. In other words, these are women who, and we've seen it. We see it in the press secretary. We're going to see it with this Harp. A woman who sort of satisfy, I think, a way in which the men of the anti-Me Too movement perceive this. And I'm going to do policy now, and I think it extends down to their policies regarding, for example, women in combat.
You wrote about it. Can we talk about that? You wrote about that with Hegseth. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One thing I do want to say in terms of, I heard a great term the other day, which broligarchy, which I thought was a very good term in terms of thinking about the way in which women, and that's not to say there aren't women being nominated for positions, certainly his chief of staff, but the way in which women are being shunned from the inner circle. And you see that even in the pictures, that there's just, I was like, how can he have 7 people around him and not a single one of them is woman? And I think it is very likely that the First Lady will not move down to D.C. I mean, she's basically said as much. She's shifted.
Well, that's her business and his business. I mean,
actually,
Why do you
say that?
It's not a constitutional provision.
It doesn't matter.
She's entitled to live her life any way she wants.
I think when you're married to the President of the United States, you give it up like everybody else has to be there and do those duties.
Yeah, on that one, I don't agree with you on. I mean, in other words, because, one is, I think at the very least it's a story. But I don't think it's a story about...
I think
secondly, I think it's odd to think of it as a sort of women's liberation thing. She can do whatever she wants.
I didn't mean it's a women's liberation thing. She wasn't elected to anything. She has no constitutional position. There's just a tradition. She's choosing not to honor the tradition. Keep in mind, put all this in context. We all, I think, agree on 90% of this. 59% of the people in the CBS News poll, which is 10% more than voted for him, 59% approve of Trump's handling of the presidential transition. Everything we're talking about is part of that transition that the American people seem wildly happy with.
What were the numbers about how many people approved of Brown versus Board of Education?
I don't think that was a majority
approval either.
I would guess that most people don't know.
It doesn't mean it's right.
I totally agree it doesn't mean it's right, but it's in the context. The American people seem to be perfectly fine with everything we're talking about so far.
And I'm not sure the Melania thing has sort of been reported on, and I'm just focused on it not as she has to follow her husband. I think if we are going to treat Trump as the real president of the United States, in other words, this is not because he is, right? If Jill Biden had not moved, if Hillary Clinton had not moved, if Laura Bush had not moved,
it's a story, and then you move on.
Well, people have moved on.
I mean, that's every story.
I'm just saying, I don't think you both seem to think it's a bigger thing. And my position is, again, she didn't like being first lady the first time either.
Every other first lady gets criticized for everything she does or doesn't do. It's just sort of why does she get the pass?
Can we talk about a much more important, at least, thing with me? You wrote a terrific piece about Hegseth, the nominee for Secretary of Defense. You wrote in The Atlantic, and his position on women in combat. I learned a lot, actually. Tell us about it.
Thank you. No, and I just heard from the Senate Armed Services Committee that is circulating there. So Hegseth is the nominee. He is formerly served in the United States military. He did not have a leadership position in that military. He has subsequently written a few books, and then also the co-host of Fox Weekends. I put that out there because he is absolutely unqualified to be the Secretary of Defense. He's never run anything major. He's never overseen troops. Okay, so that's the one piece. I just want to get that out. The other piece is he is against women in combat, and people will remember that in the Obama administration, the combat rule, women were given access to combat roles. That has taken a long time. The numbers are not significant. 4,000 women have qualified for combat in the Army out of a couple 100,000. Some of the services in their elite combat troops have 1 or 2 women. This is not like revolutionary, but he has gone on the podcast and spoken out against this. He should be challenged with it. For one, his theory of it is that things get complicated. I'm putting that in quotes. If you have a woman, and where he confuses himself is what is that complication about? Well, it's about sex. I mean, this is a man who thinks that men and women cannot be together and wants to punish the woman because men can't keep their act together. Fast forward, Hegseth is under lots and lots of scrutiny. He has had 3 wives, has gotten the next wife, who had been a mistress, pregnant each time. This is a fact. And this is talking about people's character is important if you are going to run the armed services. And then to blame women because things get complicated shows a certain amount of lack of confidence, both in our women, but also in our men. And
Does he have unilateral power as secretary, if he is secretary, to end women in combat? Can he do it by himself?
He actually
can.
Yeah, he actually could. I mean, Congress has a role, and Congress could bypass it. And this is where, I was talking to the staff on the Senate Armed Services Committee, this is where he should be challenged. Is he saying that women who have previously qualified for combat should be pulled? And if not, why not? If it's complicated, is he saying that they should be pulled for their combat, to having combat? And what will that mean for recruitment? Because anyone who knows the military, of which Hegseth appears not to, he was a soldier. There's lots of soldiers. Thank you for your service. It does not mean that you're qualified to run it. I'm a professor. It does not mean I am qualified to run a university. It's a different kind of skill. And how will he satisfy the recruitment gap without a draft? That's my question to him. Those are my questions that you may hear from a very senators.
Equity and fairness.
Yeah. But the point of my article was we fall into we being critics of it fall into the sort of DEI, woke camp. Like we're fighting on their playing field. He says it's woke to allow women in combat because any change is apparently woke in this era, and we then fight it on his level and say, oh, diversity is our greatest strength. Like literally, no, that's not why women are allowed in combat.
And by the way,
women are allowed in combat because because they were in combat.
Even before they were allowed in combat.
In Iraq and Afghanistan, when Obama started to look at this, over 100 women had been killed in some tortuous, not in combat because the Pentagon was like tortuously trying to define them as not in combat. They were assigned to combat troops. They were next to combat troops. Women have been fighting in wars in which the battlefield is not at all clear for a couple of decades. And fight me, Mr. Hegseth. I mean, I'm just like, this is such a stupid issue for him to get on. But look, if you're going to go on the podcast and start saying this stuff, and then want to be Secretary of Defense, prove it, right? And I don't know what else to do.
Well, also, obviously, the Israelis are in the middle of this situation with Gaza after the horror of.
And Ukraine.
The military in Israel has had women in it, forever?
Yeah, forever.
So they seem to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, and they have conscription. And look, the physical standards have not changed for these elite forces. That's why there's only one, I think, in the Marines, or two. I had the quote, and three in the elite Navy special units. Women. So yes, diversity is our strength, and that's all nice to say. I mean, there's another way to say it is that women in combat is a non-issue, except for men who view women's presence as complicated. That's not a combat issue. That's a personality issue, and that's Hegseth and the other people who support him. Trump has not commented on this because I think we look for clarity in their positions. There's going to be no clarity. You've got the tariff issue. No one has any idea what that means. Seb Gorka, his deputy national security advisor for counterterrorism, the guy who's going to come in, was on a podcast saying they're going to do more for Ukraine. And I'm like, this is going to be a lot of ricocheting. So,
he's in his early 40s, right? Maybe 44, something like 45.
Yeah.
This is the third wife.
But has gotten the mistresses pregnant.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if he has 7 children by the 3 wives, or if the one with the mistress is the 8th child. We don't really know.
It's 7 children. But he does live on a farm to promote Christian values.
Okay, well, that's good enough for me. Happy Thanksgiving, Juliette. It's nice to see you.
Happy Thanksgiving. I have a movie to watch.
What is it?
What?
I'm joking. I'm not going to watch it.
Secretariat. I'm telling you. You'll love it.
Goodbye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, you guys.
Happy
Thanksgiving. Thanks for coming in,
with Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and contributing writer for The Atlantic. Thank you very much, Juliette. After a quick break, we're going to be joined by Senator Ed Markey. He's going to be zooming in. He is freshly back from COP29. He's going to tell us about Trump's second term in regards to the climate and in regards to a lot of other issues that people care about. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
With Donald Trump returning to the White House, how will his policies and rhetoric affect higher ed?
The time has come to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left, and we will do that.
I'm anxious whether the overheated rhetoric of the campaign will carry over into policymaking.
What comes next on campus? On our podcast, College Uncovered. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Discovery Museum in Acton, inspiring learning through hands-on science, nature, and play. Now offering birthday parties. Learn more at discoveryacton.org. And Beacon Circle patron Karen Settle, proud to support GBH 89.7 and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock today, Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, joins us here live for Ask the AG from 1 to 2. But we're joined now live on Zoom by Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey, just back from two pretty significant events, COP29 in Azerbaijan, which we'll talk about, and many people think, at least as importantly, the Celtics celebration at the White House. Senator, the rumor is that President Biden threw you the ball and you actually caught it. Is that correct or is that not correct?
While you sit on the bench on the Malden Catholic basketball team, your dream is that someday you'll be on the White House lawn and the President of the United States will come over and all of your teammates that got all the playing time, see him throw the ball to you, you catch it just like Coach Schlegel told you would catch it if you were ever in a crucial game. And then, Mr. President, I sent it right back to him, and he caught it as well. So, yeah, wow. It's now right there, the highlight of my entire athletic career. And, it kind of still down Dever Park in Malden. Now, some people dream, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The shot goes up. Markey scores the basket to win the NBA title. I was dreaming of being on the White House lawn with the president.
Well, congratulations on that. That's
congratulations,
big. Good to see you, Senator.
I think was a wonderful moment for you, and that's great. So let's move to something that's really upsetting to a lot of us. I think for me anyway, the climate. Since the president-elect is a climate denier, it was really upset to think about what could happen during the next 4 years. You were just over at the COP29, the International Forum, talking about climate. What can you tell us?
Well, obviously, the rest of the world is very concerned that a climate denier is now going to be sitting in the Oval Office once again. And he's naming not a cabinet, but he's naming a cartel to man the Department of Interior, the Department of Energy, the EPA. Agency after agency is going to be run by essentially people who are affiliated with the oil, gas, and coal industry. And so he is obviously going to try to implement his drill, baby, drill agenda, whereas the rest of the world is looking for a plug-in agenda to move electric, to move away from fossil fuels, because the poorest countries in the world who are there are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences, most dramatically, of the harm that's going to be inflicted. And so that was the one thing that actually came out of the Azerbaijan COP. It was that by 2035, there will be $300 billion a year, which will be going to those countries from the industrialized countries. But even that is inadequate. The number is more like $1 trillion a year to deal with the damages. And just to give you an idea about how big $300 billion is, the two storms, Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Hillary, caused $300 billion worth of damage in the United States in just 2 weeks. So Helene and Milton were absolutely devastating. That was 2 weeks, and $300 billion for the whole world obviously is going to be inadequate to the task. So it's going to be a lot of difficulty that all of us are going to have to struggle with over the next 4 years. But what I did tell him is this, that the California economy is one of the top 10 in the world as an economy. So isn't New York State. New England, if it was a nation, would be in the top 20 as an economy, and that we're not going to stop. We are going to continue to fight the climate crisis. We are going to be the resistance, and great progress will continue to be made in our country on these issues, and that we are going to fight very hard to preserve the IRA, also known as the largest climate bill in history.
How are you going to do that with a minority in both the Senate and the House, and a president who's a climate denier, Senator?
Well, 80% of all the funding went to red states. Mm-hmm. And 67% of all the new jobs were created in red states since 2022 when the IRA was passed. And so I think many of these Republican House members who are up in 2026, they're going to really be on the hot seat to explain why they voted to kill thousands and thousands of jobs that are already in Georgia, already in Kentucky, already in South Carolina, because a president made a promise that those jobs would be sacrificed. So because of the narrow margin in the House and Senate, they almost have to have perfection in order to preserve their goal of killing all of those tax breaks for wind and solar, all electric vehicles, battery storage technologies. So to the extent to which this is not predetermined, we just have to put the pressure on to make sure that those members understand they're putting their own seats in jeopardy if they vote to cut the jobs that have already been created and the promise of more jobs in those red states and purple states as well. And by the way, also Republicans in New York or Republicans in California that are going to be very vulnerable in 2026. Just as a memory, Reagan came in naming James Watt, naming Ann Gorsuch, naming all these crazy anti-environmentalists as well. Well, the Democrats picked up 26 seats in the House in 1982. Just took 2 years for everyone to basically have the counter reaction. So that would be my hope, that we'd be able to convince enough Republicans. It doesn't take any more than a handful in order to block those cuts.
You know, Senator, you just mentioned the $300 billion for those devastating hurricanes that just happened, 2 of them down in Florida. The fact-based climate people talk about we're going to have ever more powerful hurricanes, wildfires, increasing tornadoes, all this stuff. And insurance companies, as you know, are already backing out of places in Florida. So at some point, doesn't it become unsustainable for the government to be bailing out, as FEMA does, at least partially, people who lose their homes or lose their businesses? How can we keep paying this kind of money? Is that an incentive that could move even climate change deniers to get with the program?
I agree with you 100%, Marjorie. I think that ultimately the private sector is going to enter into this debate. If you just look at that storm in Florida, just absolutely devastating. Well, if it had just been about 100 miles further south, it would have turned Mar-a-Lago into Mar-a-Lagoon. Okay, it would have gone right across all those very wealthy people's properties. Yeah. They'd be screaming for more relief. And ultimately, the insurance industry is just going to say to them, look, we just can't cover you anymore. You know, and the preventative programs, you know, the planet's running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets, so we have to engage in preventative care. Is wind and solar, all electric vehicles, battery storage technologies, all of these greenhouse gas reducing technologies for the long run, because that's how insurance companies view it. They look at the long-term risk. And if they just see it increasing and increasing, then a lot of people are going to be looking to the federal government And Trump's going to be saying, I'm looking at cutting Medicaid. I'm looking at cutting Title I for poor children in schools. Well, I don't think there's going to be much of an appetite to say, but for you people who live along the coast, who are climate deniers, well, we're sorry. There just isn't, there's going to be more money for you at the expense of those children. I just don't think that it's going to be sustainable. And ultimately, it will be moderate Republicans who join our coalition in order to fight climate change. But I do agree with you, ultimately it will be a coalition of private sector companies along with liberal climate activists that build the coalition that will be the winning one. And by the way, climate change wasn't created under one president, and it's not going to be solved under one president. So this is going to be a struggle that goes on past this Trump administration anyway.
We're talking to Malden Catholic's 13th man. That would be Senator Ed Markey. Senator, obviously we've been reading that the Democratic majority in the Senate is attempting to confirm as many Biden judicial appointments, obviously to the federal judiciary, as is humanly possible. What else do you, while you're in the majority, have the power to advance, protect, whatever, over the next little less than 2 months?
Well, one bill that I'm working on right now with Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. We have a mental health crisis amongst teenagers and children in our country, according to the Surgeon General, much of it related to social media. So Senator Cassidy and I have been successful in getting that passed out of the Senate Commerce Committee. We have a similar bill which has now been passed out of the House Commerce Committee, and it would basically say that these companies have to stop collecting data about these kids. It has to stop sending ads towards these kids, and if the parents and the kids want, they can just say erase all information which you've gathered about that young person, teenager or child. So that bill is somewhere between second and third base right now. We have a good chance to ultimately get it passed, especially with the Surgeon General calling it a crisis. So that would be my one hope on that one piece of legislation. But in addition, I'm working with the administration to make sure that as much of the IRA money, the climate money, just gets out of this administration. Yeah. That my climate bank that I created, $20 billion, which is going to leverage $120 billion worth of private sector investment, is out there and safe. And the same thing for the environmental justice money that has to just be ultimately completed in terms of sending it out into the communities by the Biden administration. But there are many, many programs that the Biden administration has to protect itself against, because without question, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are just going to try on January 20th of 2025 to say we're shutting it all down. So we have to get it out, make sure it's secured in the hands of the state of Massachusetts, our communities, our individuals, and therefore legally protected against what is coming, which in many instances is going to be unconstitutional, but which could get caught up in the courts for years.
Senator, speaking of getting it out and getting it in the hands of Massachusetts, $1 billion plus, give or take a few dollars, of federal money invested invested so far in new bridges to Cape Cod. Is that money safe? I don't mean, do you hope it's safe and you're going to fight for it to be safe, but is it safe?
I think that it is safe. We just have to make sure that every single document is legally airtight, that the aperture is closed that could lead to a Trump rescission of that money. And I do believe the Healy administration is doing an excellent job in completing the process to make sure that the Sagamore Bridge money, so that the Sagamore will sag no more.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. It is in fact secure.
Senator, President-elect Trump has said he's going to pardon the January 6th rioters. and go after a lot of his political enemies. There was a fascinating piece in U.S. News and World Reports by Norman Ornstein suggesting that what Biden should do is he should preemptively pardon a lot of the people that Trump has said he's going to go after, like Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Jack Smith, the special counsel,
Liz Cheney,
Representative Adam Kinzinger, people that he views as his opponents, as former Joint Chief of Staff Mark Milley, et cetera. You think that's a good idea?
I think that without question, Trump is going to try to act in a dictatorial way, in a fascistic way, in a revengeful first year, at least, of his administration towards individuals who he believes harmed him. So I do believe, and this is a good question. I have to think about it. But I would say that if it's clear by January 19th that is his intention, then I would recommend to President Biden that he provide those preemptive pardons to people, because that's really what our country's going to need next year. To Gerald Ford's credit, he pardoned Richard Nixon. It allowed our country just to close that chapter and to move on to a new era. And retrospectively, while there was a lot of criticism at the time, everyone now realizes that he really deserved the Profiling Courage Award for doing it at the time, Gerald Ford. So I think that Joe Biden could very well be in the same situation, and people will look back and just say, that's what our country wants. It wants to get past the acrimony, the bitterness, and moved on to an agenda that deals with the ordinary families in our country and not the Trump family and their grievances towards people who tried to prevent them from becoming the occupants of the Oval Office.
Yeah, Senator Markey, I believe you serve on the Health Committee. Will your vote be for or against Robert Kennedy Jr. as head of HHS?
Well, I'm going to be voting against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I believe that his views on vaccines disqualifies him. I believe his views on fluoridation disqualifies him. But it goes on and on and on over the years, including the COVID vaccine. And I think that the goal has to be to expose what he believes about these issues, to have a huge public exposition of his historical positions, and then ultimately, in my opinion, make it very difficult for every Republican senator to support him. It just has to be something that after those hearings are held, makes it hard for senators, especially those who are up in 2026, to be able to support his nomination and confirmation.
We're talking to Ed Markey, United States Senator from Massachusetts.
What's the matter with the mail in Boston, Senator?
Well, the mail in Boston is right now down to 1 or 2 days a week. And I'm going to be having a press conference at Mission Hill Post Office tomorrow to just put a spot on it. So I put a spotlight on it to talk to those community leaders, let them express how frustrating it is for them in Boston, but it's true across the rest of the Commonwealth as well, to put pressure on Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, to do his job, to make sure that the mail is delivered. And that's going to be something that that I'm partnering with Congresswoman Presley, Councilor Durkin on in Boston, but again, it's across the whole Commonwealth. There is a crisis in the post office in terms of its delivery of the mail to ordinary citizens.
Yeah, we only have a minute left, Senator. We really appreciate your time. Very briefly, something we've talked a lot about, I know you care a lot about, the debacle with Steward Healthcare. There's good news, I think. Federal authorities are seizing phones and issuing search warrants for the phones of the head guy and a number 2 guy who still lives here in Brookline. What's your position on the whole issue of for-profit entities being in the hospital business in general, Senator?
Well, again, Mass General, nonprofit, Beth Israel, nonprofit. We have a nonprofit hospital system in Massachusetts, and that's pretty much what has been the system for the whole country for 100 years. What Stewart did, what Ralph De La Torre did, was he pioneered something that would turn health into wealth for investors. And we need guardrails around that. We can't allow that to happen, which is why I've introduced legislation to the effect to which there has to be complete transparency in any of those deals, which takes a nonprofit and turns it into a for-profit. That there has to be an escrow account that's set aside that guarantees that the funding will be there for the emergency rooms, for the operating rooms in a hospital, and that ultimately HHS has to give approval to any of these mergers so that there would be a full and total vetting of these transfer of properties over. Because through Ralph De La Torre, through all of his partners, through all of his cronies, we have seen that they are willing to loot emergency rooms, loot operating rooms for their own personal self-aggrandizement. And that's why Kearney and Neshoba Valley and St. Elizabeth's and Good Samaritan and hospital after hospital in Massachusetts actually collapsed for all intents and purposes. The governor's doing a good job in trying to save critical parts of that healthcare infrastructure, but ultimately lives were put at risk. Nurses at St. Elizabeth actually had to put up their own personal money in order to have caskets for babies who were dying because Stewart didn't even have the money for that. And it's just absolutely unconscionable what Ralph De La Torre did. I'm glad that the federal agencies are now moving in and starting to get at the heart of what has happened, but accountability is still in its earliest stages. Ralph De La Torre and his cronies must be brought to the bar of justice.
Ed Markey, we
Senator,
really
thank
appreciate
you
your
so
time,
much.
as always. Thanks so much.
We've been
Great to be
speaking
with you.
with
Thank you.
Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey, and we much appreciate his time. Up next, the Horn of Plenty and you. We'll read some of your texts about the cornucopia, symbol of abundance, beloved childhood schoolcraft, used to be at everybody's Thanksgiving table. Has anyone actually seen one? In the last 50 years, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Annette Gordon-Reed. She's a renowned historian, lawyer, and a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. She's written about some of our nation's darkest moments. Today, she joins us to shine a light on these fraught times and to place them in the scope of America's history. That and more today on The Culture Show at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Jose Mateo Ballet Theater, bringing its enchanting production of The Nutcracker to the Strand Theater in Dorchester from December 7th through 22nd. Audiences can rediscover the magic with this holiday classic. Tickets available at ballettheater.org/tickets. And Community Servings, creating access to the healthy nutrition that people need in order to improve their health and well-being for 34 years. Serving medically tailored meals across all of Massachusetts. Learn more at servings.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Margegan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General joins us in 10 minutes. Our text segment of the day, Marjorie and Zoe were talking this morning. Whatever happened to the cornucopia?
That's right.
The symbol of harvest that every New England school kid allegedly drew.
It's a tragedy.
And for those of you like me, what is a cornucopia? Marjorie has a lot of text. Share them with us, please.
Well, Sarah from Waltham says, Thanksgiving could not come soon enough for the Boston Public Radio team. Jim is sounding completely unhinged today in the best of ways. At first, I feared it might be long COVID, but then I realized it's just Jim.
What does that have to do with cornucopia?
Nothing.
Okay,
But
good.
she
Fine.
just said-
Thank you.
Liz in Rhode
Thank you.
Island says, was no one paying attention during the Hunger Games, movies and books? Remember
I
that
didn't see
show?
it. I know it is. I
It was
didn't see it.
that very upsetting show.
What's it got to do
Anyway,
with cornucopia?
Well, the cornucopia was a large golden curved structure where the tributes would go to resupply weaponry before going back into the forest and trying to slaughter all their competitors. And
Wow.
maybe that's why it's gone out of fashion.
That's amazing.
Now, several people have said that they have had cornucopias handed down from mothers and grandmothers.
that's very exciting.
And they put the centerpiece Thanksgiving filled with fresh fruits
Sure.
and nuts, or plastic fruits and
Oh,
nuts,
that's really
or
nice.
bread from the North End. And then here's an interesting.
What is that?
Well, this anonymous texter used to work as a florist during COVID,
Oh, how nice.
when all the Chinese imports dried up. So she has very bad news on the cornucopia
what is
front.
it?
She thinks tariffs, both old and Trump's new ones,
Wow.
are responsible for the tragic loss
Of
of
the
the
cornucopia?
cornucopia. Yes. Now, people that are above 50 years old might remember that was a big thing on Thanksgiving in every
Was?
elementary school in Massachusetts. Yeah, you drew pictures of cornucopias,
Okay.
and you were all supposed to have
All
them
right,
on
fine.
your table. I guess you in Philadelphia, Jim, just missed out on that entire.
No, we were worried about
operation.
Dickies. Now, here, if you're having trouble pronouncing the word, which apparently some are, we're happy to announce that an old BPR friend, that of course is Julian Mikhael, is here to help everybody out. Here it is.
In British English, it's said as cornucopia.
Cornucopia.
In American English, dicky.
Fine. That actually was not part of the original thing. So essentially, I was serious, by the way. I had no idea what a cornucopia was, and there's some Zeusian connection. We were talking about this earlier. You know
That's
that,
right.
like the ancient Greeks or something.
That's right.
What is
According
that?
to the ancient Greeks, the horn of plenty, as the cornucopia is originally known, was broken off the head of an enchanted she-goat by Zeus himself.
Wow, that's
As
amazing.
the myth goes, the infant Zeus was hidden away from his father
Wow.
in a cave
That's
on the
great.
island of Crete while holding a large
cornucopia. Right over his you-know-what. Okay, thank you. Whatever his name is, Julian. That's it.
I love that.
welcome.
Excuse me?
Who is? Oh,
what?
God, we got to get that guy on the show.
That was not planned, by the way.
Plan. Ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
I'm Senior Investigative Reporter Philip Martin, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1, Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to
At hand, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
It will make a big difference in creating the conditions that will allow people to return to their homes safely in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon. And I also believe that by de-escalating tensions in the region, it can also help us to end the conflict in Gaza.
Blinken on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was expected to issue a televised speech this hour after he wrapped up his meeting with his cabinet. President-elect Donald Trump says he plans to hit America's 3 biggest trading partners with new tariffs as high as 25% as part of an effort to crack down on illegal migration and fentanyl smuggling. NPR's Brian Mann reports some experts are skeptical the pressure will work.
Writing on social media, Trump threatened 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and a new 10% tariff on China after he takes office in January. Trump said the tariffs would remain in effect until, quote, drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. But drug policy experts, including Jonathan Calkins at Carnegie Mellon University, say the black market pipeline of drugs can't just be turned off.
Unfortunately, it's quite difficult to control fentanyl because it's so easy for the illegal supply chains to produce and distribute it.
Experts say there's also a risk a new trade war would end international cooperation aimed at
launched 188 drones and 4 cruise missiles, the latest attack on the civilian power grid ahead of the winter months. Russia's defense ministry acknowledged it launched attacks on 135 regions of Ukraine, but said it struck military air bases, troops, and technical hardware. Meanwhile, independent analysts report significant Russian advances in Kherson, Donetsk, and other areas along the current front line. The Russian advance comes amid signs of escalation from both sides. In recent days, Ukraine has used its access to more powerful Western weapons to strike deeper into Russia. In turn, the Kremlin struck Ukraine with a new hypersonic weapon it claims is invincible to Western air defenses. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Governor Maura Healey is urging striking teachers in Beverly and Marblehead to finish agreements now and get back to school while the final details of their contracts are worked out. Healey met with union leaders at the State House this morning, then said her focus is on the
marching band kid thinks like the craziest thing you could do is perform in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So I'm really excited and grateful for the opportunity.
UMass is sending more than 400 musicians, baton twirlers, and dancers to the parade. The trip to New York also includes a Wednesday morning joint performance with a marching band from the University of South Carolina. We've got umbrella weather on the way. Showers this afternoon, highs in the 40s, clear skies tonight, lows in the 30s. Right now it's 45 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. We are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim. Oh, very quickly.
What's
I just
that?
want to mention we were talking about cornucopias before,
Yeah, I
the horn of
remember.
plenties that people
Yeah, I know.
use on their Thanksgiving table. Well,
What about
Ken
it?
Salem, I think, captured the whole thing
What'd
perfectly.
he say?
He said, Jim is a horn of plenty of noise today and every day.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Marjorie.
You're welcome.
It's time for November's edition of Ask the Attorney General. For the rest of the show, Attorney General Andrea Campbell is here taking our questions and yours. Hello, Attorney General. How are you? Nice to see you.
I'm doing well. Thank
Great.
you for
Happy
having
Thanksgiving
me.
in
Hello,
advance.
Happy Thanksgiving to
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
If you want to call or text the Attorney General, it's 877-301-8970. Oh, and Zoe, our colleague, is over here. If you're at the library at the Newsfeed Cafe and have a question for the Attorney General, if you go to Zoe will decide if you make the cut or not. So here we are.
Oh, so Attorney General Campbell, I think the last time we talked to you was before the election, and we talked
But
about...
before we even go to the election, because
Yes.
clearly there's a range of emotions there, I just have to tell you, I look like I have, well, maybe actually this makes me look great, but like beach hair.
She
My
says so
hair is
herself.
straight. You have to stand in who you are.
I
That's
understand.
right.
Fine.
You do. And love yourself.
You
It's
do.
really
Okay, fine.
important. But I just have to, so my hair is all wet. I was soaking wet earlier.
It looks
because-
good.
Thank you.
You're
But
welcome.
I was outside in Framingham with fellow electeds and a whole host of volunteers at the Pearl Street Cupboard, which does remarkable work with the Greater Boston Food Bank and United Way, Tri-County, handing out, millions in pounds of food for folks. Big, huge bags for Thanksgiving. And so I just had to acknowledge them. It's Thanksgiving season. There's a lot of folks right now who sadly are dealing with hunger and insecurity. And even in Massachusetts, nearly 1 in 3 families on a daily basis in our great Commonwealth, which I think is the best state in the country, are still struggling with hunger and hunger insecurity. And you had folks in the pouring rain, cold, out there handing out food. And I just have to lift folks up because I know there's a lot going on in the world, but there are beautiful, bright spots that we should celebrate and that bring tremendous joy. So,
Well, but just to extend that, yesterday we were lucky enough to talk to a guy who's walking 43 miles from Springfield to, I think, Greenfield. That'd be Congressperson Jim McGovern.
Right, that's
to
right.
raise money.
He's been a leader
and
on these
Jim
issues.
called in, and he's
That's
raising
right.
money for the Western Mass Food Bank,
That's
a
right.
variation of the same theme, and has been a leader
and
in Washington on
Congressman
these
Clark
issues.
was with us.
Yeah,
Congresswoman
great.
Catherine Clark and Senate President Spilka and many other local electeds. It was great.
Great time to care for your fellow humans.
That's
correct.
right.
Well, okay, so back to this thing that some of us in Massachusetts and across the country are very upset about the results of the election. We talked about you had known Kamala Harris and had worked with her and campaigned for her. She didn't win. But now the concern is, what can Massachusetts do? What can you do as the Attorney General to deflect from the worst of what President-elect Trump may be planning for here?
I will say, like many folks, including some in my office, and I don't want to suggest that everyone in my office voted for Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. I respect people's decisions here and whoever they voted, including within my own team. I obviously was very disappointed and devastated by the results. Said a lot of prayers and dusted myself off and went into the office and told my team, number one, it's really important that folks acknowledge whatever emotions they're feeling, anxiety, depression, if you're going through stages of grief, and to take time to care for themselves. I'm always promoting that. I think we don't do that very well. And even to my surprise, I had a team member who came up to me after we had some town halls in the office to create space to chat about the recent election, that she had gone home and her spouse had gone to work and no one brought up the election at all, which is just crazy to me. So that's just number one. And we said the same to our constituents. Take care of yourselves, your children. It's a difficult time, to say the least. And regardless of even who you voted for, the divisiveness we're seeing in this country is real, and it has impacts, especially on our children and our overall well-being. So one, take care of yourselves. And then I told my team and anyone else in the public that I was able to speak to that we're ready, and bring it on. Any threats that come from Washington, D.C., that threaten the work we have done here in Massachusetts, we're ready to respond if it threatens people's rights, if it threatens their security, whether in healthcare, housing, access to reproductive health care, gender-affirming care, if it threatens their very existence, so the rhetoric around LGBTQ plus communities, including our trans youth, our immigrants, we're prepared. And we're prepared to fight and to fight back with the hopes that this new administration will be collaborative, but our eyes are wide open because the rhetoric during the election spoke to a different type of administration we'll have to deal with. And if people didn't know before, I used to stress and ask folks, do you know who your attorney general is? Because I knew the importance of my role and this office's role in people's daily life. Now people know. Right now, the number one elected in many ways on the front lines to respond to any threats to our people here are AGs. And so I'm blessed to work with some great AGs across the country and look forward to fighting back to protect our residents here in Mass.
You know, you said you were hopeful, and you were talking about what Trump and Vance said before the election. Let's talk for 1 second about what they've said since the election. Mayor Wu was with us after, and she said this about this mass deportation proposal that allegedly is going to start on day one, January 20th. I'll read you part of what she said. The Boston Trust Act puts strict prohibitions on local law enforcement from being pulled into becoming the enforcement arm for the whims of whatever the sort of approach of federal immigration law might be. This is not something that is possible under the laws in Boston. I thought pretty respectful. Here's the response, I would say grotesquely disrespectful, from Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, responding to what Mayor Wu had to say here at WCVB, a whole bunch of places saying this is what the law of Boston is. Here's Homan.
So she helps us, she gets the hell out of the way, because they're going to do it. And look, there's a clear line here, and they can't cross a clear line. I'll suggest she read Title 8, United States Code 1324 III, that says, you know, you can't harbor, conceal an illegal alien in front of law enforcement officers. So I hope she don't cross that line.
So I hope she don't cross that line. She gets the hell out of the way unless she helps us. I mean, this is post-election, so the intention is pretty clear. Are you as confident as Governor Healy is and the mayor in Boston is that we have the ability in Massachusetts to resist aiding the federal government in this effort?
So I first have to take a step back and acknowledge that I spoke just a minute ago about how I am absolutely prepared to fight for our constituents here in Massachusetts, including those who identify as a part of our immigrant community, a very robust community that contributes not just culturally, but economically. If President-elect is able to proceed with his mass deportation plan of millions of people, it will disrupt significant industries here, including our healthcare industry, higher ed, those who serve our elders and elder care tremendously. And then also, it's not as easy as people think. Because if you're talking about mass deportation of folks in the millions, you are going to be rounding up folks who are here legally. Simple as that. And so this is fear-mongering. This is also, of course, fueled by hatred and fear of other. So I just want to name that. As I am talking to my colleagues, and we're collectively naming what is coming to us in terms of this rhetoric, we are prepared to fight collectively and together. So with Mayor Wu, the governor, it's going to take all of us. And I told them our AG's office is willing to step up and protect them. So, for example, we can't really reply to hypotheticals. They're talking about what they're going to do, but yet have not produced any plan on how they're going to do it. We have not just our Constitution, we have state laws, some local ordinances that are applicable here to help us fight back. And I have to name that we're prepared and ready to fight back on any plan to mass deport our people. But two other things I want to stress that I think is really important. Our office, every single day, is out there fighting to protect the public safety of our residents and holding folks accountable if they commit crimes in Massachusetts. That's whether they are immigrants, those with no paperwork, or U.S. citizens. That accountability work we have already been doing. And here you have folks suggesting that we haven't, and actually just fear-mongering, suggesting that a whole group of people is out there committing illegal crimes every day. It's not true. And we are in the market, we're in the business every single day of protecting our people, and we're going to keep doing that, right? We're going to also recognize that at moments, some of the people perpetuating crimes in our communities may be undocumented. And if we are holding them accountable, as this office does every single day, the AG's office does this on a regular basis, they are deported. So we're already doing the work. And so right now you have an incoming administration threatening people's rights, and we're prepared to defend them. And I just remind folks, everyone should be concerned about this rhetoric because it will disrupt industries and the contributions of so many folks here in Massachusetts. And we're prepared to fight back. And let me tell you, on day one, good luck. It's not happening on day one. And why is that? Because you have AGs all across the country ready and prepared to use the rule of law to fight back on these deportation plans that would threaten the interests of folks in Massachusetts.
Well, there are also a bunch of AGs that treat people who are not born here as subhuman species, and I assume they are totally ready to cooperate with this administration, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
Can we raise one more thing before we get to the calls? 877-301-8970. We spoke to you a lot before November 5th about question 1, which would allow the auditor to audit the legislature. It was opposed by the legislature. They would not come on the show to defend their position or anywhere else, as far as I know. And in an act of what I consider to be grotesque irresponsibility, Senate President and the Speaker said, even before the voters had spoken, we may just change this thing depending on the margin. Well, the margin was a mere 72%. 71.6%. When you certified the question for the ballot, you said at the same time, there still may be constitutional issues, even if this were to become law. It is law, or will be law as soon as the process goes through with the governor's office. What are the constitutional issues? Do you support what the voters supported? Where are you now?
Well, I absolutely support the will of the voters and a more transparent government. I've been on the record on those issues since I was on the city council. Expanding the public records law, making sure not only our operations in the State House or in other branches of government are more transparent to the public. Absolutely support that. Right now, I have the auditor pushing for our office to get involved. There is no role for our office to play right now.
Why can't you make a pronouncement like you did when you certified the question? There was no obligation on your part to say there may be remaining constitutional issues. Why can't you say now, if you believe it, there are no constitutional issues, the voters have spoken?
No, we don't know that. And why don't we know that? There's no role for my office to play right now. We certified the ballot question. The voters spoke. I respect the will of the voters. Now, the second piece is this law doesn't go into effect until 30 days. So right now, nothing can happen until the law that just passed actually goes into effect. And then once that passes, the legislature can respond to the auditor's letter and say, we're going to give you X information or Y information in response to her. And if she feels as though she doesn't get what she's demanded of them, they both could say, well, we think we've given you an adequate amount. She can say, you haven't. Then they can create a legal dispute and then ask our office to get involved. Right now, as we stand here, you have
They both might ask you to get involved.
They might. So right now, as we stand here, though, we have the law hasn't gone into effect because we haven't had the 30 days. Number two, there is no legal dispute. So I, in my office, as the Attorney General's office, has no role right now. And so I want to clarify that for the public because there's this suggestion out there that we do. We do not. Give it 30 days. They'll have to have their back and forth. And then, depending on what that dispute becomes, they can then seek to try to resolve it via litigation. Then we might be able to get involved. But right now, we're dealing with nothing but hypotheticals.
Fair enough. Kate in Cambridge, you're first with the Attorney General. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure.
I have a compound question. I am an early educator for the past 25 years. And at making $52,000, I was told as a single parent with 2 kids that I didn't qualify for EBT benefits. So what is the state going to do to revamp the system to, one, support educators who are already at the bottom tier of the education, poll, And how are we going to change the standards that are outdated?
Well, Kate, I think this is more of a question possibly for the administration and the legislature, but if you could stay on, if there's something specific on your particular case and we can be helpful, we're happy to look into it. But if you want to stay on, we're happy to continue the conversation with you with respect to your particular issue and then have a larger policy conversation. And I will say, in addition to our litigation tools, which are significant and of course going to be really appropriate in the new year, we do file legislation in our office to solve different problems, and we take the lead on a whole host of things. So if that looks like it could be helpful at some point, we want to be helpful. We support educators, and we certainly support early ed providers, especially as a mom of 2 young boys. So if you want to stay on, Kate, that would be helpful.
Yeah, our producers will get your contact info and pass it along.
One of the things we did learn from this election, cost of living is a huge issue for people across the country, and particularly here in Massachusetts. Cost of housing is huge. Under the Baker administration, we had this MBTA communities law, which said around T-stops, people were going to make up plans to build more housing. A lot of towns went along with it. Milton didn't. They objected to it. Now you get Needham objecting to this too. They're going to go to the polls to vote on a new housing plan. So is this going to happen? Are we going to get somewhere with this, or is this going to be one town after another after another?
Well, we don't know. I want to stress, and I don't think it gets the attention it deserves, there are over 100 municipalities that have come into compliance, working towards compliance, and actually more working towards compliance or in compliance than towns that are not. And here you have a community actually where a bylaw was passed, and now you have a few residents who are upset with the efforts by local folks to actually come into compliance, but who are upset trying to stop that from happening. And I hope they don't, because the last I checked, housing and affordability is the #1 issue that people are dealing with, and not just in Massachusetts, across this entire country. Right now, the median sales price of a home is close to $1 million. That affects public employees, elders who want to downsize, young people who are graduating from our colleges, who want to stay here. It affects employers and the business community. The list is long. And people will leave Massachusetts if they can't afford to stay here. And so you had a Republican governor, obviously Governor Baker, a Democratic legislature that came together and said, we need a mandatory policy, not a volunteer policy. If you have the public, if you have the T in your community as a public good, you have an obligation to build more dense housing in order to be able to help us with this housing crisis. And the best thing about the law that also needs to be lifted up is that it provides municipalities with incredible flexibility and the ability to not only figure out where to build that housing, how to build that housing, but to also work with us. And we want to continue to provide technical assistance, and we hope municipalities will work with us to address this housing crisis.
By the way, in fairness, when you said a few people, almost 4,000 people signed the petition to get the voters. So there are a lot of people in Needham that are unhappy with what their town meeting did, right?
For me, that's a few people.
Okay.
Why is that? When you look at the bulk of municipalities and local leaders, and I would say millions of people who not only supported the passage of the MBTA communities law in the first place, but also their municipality coming into compliance. I mean, people are bending over backwards at local election authorities, local town officials, working with community on education to help them come into compliance. And I want to lift them up, not the few that want to stand in the way of progress.
Do you know what I ever thought about? If you end up losing the case with Milton at the SJC.
I'm not putting that in.
I know you're not, but assuming that you do, for argument's sake.
I'm not.
Would a town that voted under the law that was nullified by the court would their vote still be in effect, or because it was under the... You don't want to answer the question.
No, we have no idea.
Okay.
Because we have no idea what the court's going to come back with, and especially in terms of the remedy.
Here's a text from Craig. Whose job is it to ensure that teachers obey the laws against going on strike? If there's state law, why does it not appear to ever be enforced? And people know there are still two teachers' unions on the North Shore on strike.
Beverly, Marblehead.
That's right. What's the answer?
And so a couple things. I have expressed my concern publicly on the teachers on strike that have been on strike for over 2 weeks now, keeping kids out of school, and it's unacceptable. Right now, our kids need to be in school, and they can be in school while negotiations continue, with the hopes that the teachers and, of course, the school district can come together and resolve their issues. Kids need to be in school. The effect it's having on their learning, their development, also the parents, including parents that don't have flexibility at their jobs, and the divisiveness it's creating in a community is unacceptable. Right now in Massachusetts, the law is what it is, which does not grant teachers the right to strike. And as the Attorney General, whose responsibility is to enforce the law, I have concerns about it. The hiccup here that is different than, say, the enforcement of our MBTA communities law, or even my involvement if at some point there's a legal dispute between the auditor and the legislature on the ballot question, is we actually don't have a role here, in that we don't represent SERB, which is the entity that is in court and engaging with the court on the enforcement of that strike law. So we don't have a direct role to play. Hence, you see the governor, of course, the lieutenant governor, governor's legal, working and doing their best. And then the other piece of this is our young people have a constitutional right to education. And that's the part that I think people are exploring right now. Who has standing to challenge what's going on? It may be parents, it may be someone else. But directly in terms of our ability to represent this particular board, we don't have that.
But your position, just so I'm clear, is the teachers should return to work.
Yes.
And what do you think of the labor board reversing in the last couple of days what had been precedent for years and ruling, state labor board, ruling that the communities in question had no obligation to bargain at all with workers, teachers, while they're striking? It's a reversal of age-old policy here.
It is. Well, I will say, obviously in Beverly, they still showed up to negotiate. And that, I think, that you should afford them some credit there. They're still rolling up their sleeves to hope to get to an agreement with
What do you
the
think of the
teachers'
decision,
union.
though, by the state labor board?
It's expansive, but I'm more concerned about, we have a law on the books that says teachers can't strike, and we're seeing more municipalities where teachers are striking. We don't have a direct role in the AG's office, and this is actually on the exception side. This is not the norm, to represent a board in this context. And so even when it came up in Newton, we sort of watched it unfold from a distance, really pushing folks on all sides to come to an agreement and to do it quickly so it wouldn't harm our kids. We're doing the same thing here, and working with the administration, including the governor and lieutenant governor, and everyone else to get our kids back into school, especially our kids who are most vulnerable and kids on IEPs and with disabilities. It is extremely concerning. And for folks who may think this is not applicable to them, I think the concern that people have is it can come to their municipality next.
Yeah, and if it's, well, we'll move on. 877-301-8970 is the number if you want to call or text. The Attorney General is going to be with us until the top of the hour. I've had a couple of emails about Enrique Delgado Garcia, who was a 25-year-old state trooper recruit who died in supposedly a boxing training thing back in September. And people are wondering, it's now November, what is taking so long in this investigation into what happened to him?
So as I said to his family, obviously, when I attended his services and had the opportunity to engage with his family that I am sure remains devastated by the loss of Enrique, I, along with team members, felt the same way. He was young. He was looking to become a state trooper and to serve the Commonwealth, and obviously tragically died at a young age. So what my obligation was to immediately find someone to look into this who had significant transparency and can help us move down a path of accountability. That is ongoing. David Meyer, who I appointed, is doing a great job, I think. He knows what he's doing. He has decades of experience. And like I asked the family, I said the same thing to his fellow classmates and so many others. Please be patient. It is an investigation. That means it must be thorough. You're talking to people, not just people who were there before, during, after. So it has to be comprehensive. And you cannot do a thorough and a comprehensive investigation and get folks the answers they need in a short period of time. So he is actively working. I appointed him as quickly as I could, finding the best person to do the job. And as soon as that concludes, we'll come back and report publicly as to what's going on.
Sammy and Melrose, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Welcome.
Hey, Attorney General
Hi,
Campbell.
Sammy.
How you doing? But I'm a Lyft driver, and I just, have something I wanted to communicate about their policies. First of all, I wanted to thank you for suing Lyft and making them give drivers a livable minimum wage. It has made a huge difference, and you might have earned my vote for life for that alone.
Thank you.
But basically, the company's deactivation policy that's how they can fire their drivers remains horrendous. So I just want to tell you a quick story which shows that.
Mm-hmm.
About a month ago, I tried to log onto my Lyft account and got a message saying my account was on hold. That was on a Friday night. And so for the next week, I spent most of my waking hours texting representatives through their app. It's pretty much impossible to get a phone number where you can actually talk to a human being. So I was trying to resolve this. And their incompetence was SNL skit level absurd. They kept telling me I needed to reply to an email that they'd sent, but that I'd never actually received it. When I told them I didn't get the email, they told me to wait and they'd resend it, which they never did. I asked if I could actually talk to someone on the phone, and they said someone would call me. That never happened. So this went on for basically a week. So what ended up happening was I ended up contacting Lyft through their website, and someone finally got back to me. And here's the deal. A rider has said I'd verbally abused them and spat on them. Okay? Now, this was absurd. I'll be 49 in a few days.
Hey,
and
Sammy, I hate to do this. We have tons of calls. Can you get to the question, and then maybe the details or something you and the Attorney General's office could discuss off air, if that's okay with you?
Fair enough. So finally, what I'm saying is, at Lyft and Uber, a driver can be permanently deactivated if they get certain reports. There needs to be no evidence whatsoever. All that's required is a rider saying something about you. Lyft eventually reinstated me, but they told me if I got another report, I could be permanently deactivated. And, it's America in 2024. I know of no other job where someone can be
You're exactly right,
completely
Sammy.
fired without any evidence whatsoever. So I just wanted to know, can your office do anything to help out with this?
Absolutely.
And I'm more than willing to work with your office in any way I can to help get rid of these atrocious policies.
Sammy, while the Attorney General is answering, we're going to put you on hold, and we'll take your contact info and give it to her office.
Yes.
So stick around, please. I'm sorry, Attorney General.
This is great. So, Sammy, thank you for the call, and thank you for lifting up this work that this office did to support drivers for both Lyft and Uber. It is precedent and historic in the country in terms of ensuring drivers like Sammy got access to a living wage, over $32 an hour. In addition, paid benefits, workers' comp, access to health care. They had none of this before, and this affected, of course, millions of drivers in the country. And Uber and Lyft would have you suggest that they did it. They did not. It was our office that did it. But on this deactivation piece, that also was a part of our settlement. So, Sammy, stay on.
Oh.
It was the number one issue we actually heard from drivers in terms of their concern with Uber and Lyft, where they could just be deactivated.
Deactivate is a euphemism for fired.
You're fired.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
You're removed from the platform. You get no notice. Under our settlement with them, they are required to give a written notification that they are deactivated. And you give the notification so that the driver can challenge and also have a right to an appeal. Never happened before, but that's what's required now. So, Sam, if you could stay on the line.
Great.
And one thing the settlement requires is an ongoing back and forth between my office and these companies to continue to implement the provisions of the settlement. But deactivation, we worked on that, and I'm excited for what it can do for drivers, including in the context of Sammy.
Sammy, thanks for the call.
Thank
Before
you.
we take a break, I know in the next month we're going to get a lot of texts and emails here saying I want to give to a charity, but I don't know which are the legit ones, which are the ones that all the money goes to administration. Is your office helping this?
Tuesday. Yeah, we'll have actually updated guidance coming out soon for Giving Tuesday, so folks not only know what they should look for, but before they give, how to do that research on an organization, make sure it's a legitimate organization. So more guidance will come. We play a role when it comes to charities, nonprofits, but so does the Secretary of State. So folks should check out our website soon, and also the Secretary of State.
Website is?
mass.gov/AGO.
Great. We got to take a break.
We're talking to the Attorney General with the Commonwealth. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour. You can call her or text at 877-301-8970. We're broadcasting from Boston Public Radio and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, we've got the latest on a Thanksgiving storm that could affect your travel plans. Boston's official Christmas tree has arrived at Boston Common, and NPR's Books We Love. The staff has helped pick 350 of the year's best books. We'll preview the list. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Beacon Circle patron Karen Settle, proud to support GBH 89.7 and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browley. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just joining us, it's Ask the Attorney General with Andrea Joy Campbell, kind enough to join us and you for a full hour until the end of the show at 2 o'clock. You can call, lines are full, but you can call or text. You can do that anytime, 877-301-8970. Or if you're here, you can go to our colleague Zoe and ask a question directly to the AG.
Attorney General, this is another why is it taking so long question from survivors of clergy sexual abuse. A bunch of people from Fall River, Worcester, Springfield sat down with then Attorney General Maura Healey's office in 2021 to talk about what was happening, a lot of it at this Whitensville Treatment Center, where children and teenagers allegedly abused. And Terry McKernan, who's president of Bishop Accountability, also was involved. I've known him for a long time. They've done great work, actually, in tracking this clergy sexual abuse stuff.
They have.
And says that even though there was a grand jury involved when Tom Riley was the Attorney General a million years ago, he was very quick to release these reports. And people are wondering, again, Terry McKernan says there's no urgency here, even given the alleged secrecy of, well, not alleged secrecy, there is secrecy of grand jury proceedings. Why, again, is this taking so long?
I don't want to discount the work of this incredible organization and so many others in helping survivors, especially in the context of clergy abuse. I am grateful for the leadership of folks, including those who participate in any type of investigation, to relive their harm in order to make sure folks are held accountable. I inherited this, and where it is in the courts, and I can't say anything more. I wish I could, but I can't. When I can, folks will hear from me, including details as to why I can't say anything more right now. And in terms of past investigations where there is a grand jury involved, it depends on when you're allowed to release something based on grand jury proceedings. It depends. I have no idea what authority, or I should say, what was given to, say, A.G. Riley then, what his office did. It depends. But in the context of this one, I can't say any more because it is the court that has to go through a process.
Which court? Is it the Superior Court?
Let's just say I want to just leave it alone.
Wait a second, you can't tell us what the court is?
Yes, I think it's Superior Court, but I can get details on the actual. Why I want to be careful is, in a public setting like this, I want to be careful not even in naming the court or the judge that is involved to create some type of issue where I suggest, for example, the judge is standing in the way of transparency or a court is standing in the way of transparency. It is a process when you have an investigation and a grand jury process as a part of that investigation. It's a process, and I need folks, and I'm asking them to be a little bit more patient as it goes through that process before I can say more.
But you can't even say if the diocese or the objectors, because they object to everything that is transparent. You can't. Okay, fair enough. John in Nantucket, she is nodding, I think, in agreement that you can't. John in Nantucket, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, John.
Thank you very much, Jim, Marjorie, and A.G. Campbell. I'm greatly appreciative of this opportunity to see if there's anything you can do to help us out. About 25 years ago, we bought our house on a public road on Nantucket. Had about 30 homes on it. In January, about 5 years ago, we lost part of our road and access to our homes for about 12 houses. The town did a land swap with Nantucket Conservation to provide access back to our road for this dozen houses. For the last 4 years, we've been going down a neighbor's driveway and imposing on them, and they have said they're no longer going to extend that courtesy as of this March. The town is trying to require the 12 homeowners to pay for the implementation of the of the road and make us pay for any ongoing maintenance. Is there no obligation for a town or municipality to provide access to a home when we purchased it on a public road? And is there anything you might be able to do to help?
Well, John, I'm going to have you follow up on this one if you don't mind staying on, because there may be more details and specifics that we need. And I always want to be careful. And yes, I am the Attorney General, but sometimes can offer legal advice and sometimes I can't. But if you could stay on, it is not uncommon at moments for our office to get involved in land disputes or things with municipalities or public and private owners. That has happened. But if you could stay on and leave your contact information, we will follow up with you ASAP.
John, hold on. As the Attorney General said, we'll get your info and pass it along.
Yeah. Can I just name something?
Of course you can.
On the abuse question that we got.
Yeah.
And like I said, I never want to discount that because many of the victims we're talking about in the context of a larger issue of clergy abuse are kids, right? And the lack of transparency and lack of accountability. But I would point to folks, if they were following Maryland, for example, including my colleague who was elected the same year as me, he went through a process. It wasn't a slow one, but he went through a process in order to be able to release certain information, even in redacted form. We're going through a similar process. And so I want folks to know we're not just sitting at the office doing nothing with respect to ensuring there's transparency on this issue. And I never want to discount that, because the folks that do this work either have been abused themselves, they do this work because it's pain they're turning into purpose to help others. So we're not sitting on our hands. When you go through a process, unfortunately, it involves several different stakeholders. But I didn't want to discount the advocacy, and I wanted to name that we are on it, and also looking to states like Maryland, who did this most recently as well.
But it's your position before the court that you do want to disclose this? Is the court aware of that?
I am saying nothing.
Okay.
But there's a bigger picture here.
I can't. I literally can't.
In all the postmortems about the election, bigger picture here that talk about how democratic cities often, Massachusetts is a pretty secretive place in general. The government is very secretive in Massachusetts, unlike a lot of other states.
It's the most secretive in the United States of America.
That things kind of drag on, and there's a lot of complaining about the courts being really slow. Trials end at 4 o'clock. I think they could end at 5, actually, and get that extra hour in there. But that we're very, very slow, and the old justice delayed is justice denied kind of thing, and that people have to wait so long for resolution.
And I understand that not only from a professional lens, and I work with a team that is, I often would say maybe overworked and underpaid, because they're passionate public servants. They could be making a lot more resources in the private sector. They choose to do this work because they care about service. They care about transparency. They care about accountability and compassionate leadership. All of us professionally care about that. And for me, it's personal. I often talk about my twin brother, Andre, dying while in the custody of the Department of Corrections.
Yes.
My family, to this day, has no idea how that happened. There was no one ever held accountable. And even when I was sharing that story, no one called me up and said, hello, we'd like to talk to you about that. It just doesn't sound right. He didn't receive health care. What happened there? No accountability. And I have learned to accept that and receive it in the context of his case, and to actually take whatever angst and anger that I had years ago and to turn it into work and to meaning. And for me, that means using the tools of this office to ensure folks' transparency, but most importantly, accountability. And so that's why I wanted to say a little bit more on that, because that is abuse, that is harm, that is family violence, that is violence. And we take that very seriously. But the rule of law, including our legal system here in Massachusetts, prohibits me from saying more than that we're going through a process. And when I can say more, we will be sure to make sure that we come back to this space and so many others to share directly with folks that were involved.
And for people that don't know, your brother was very young.
He was 29.
29.
So speaking of transparency and accountability, 2 quick things. Well, one quick, what not so quick. Attorney General, the SJC ruled unanimously a week or so ago that in these occasionally secret magistrate proceedings, we're the only state that has them, I still don't understand why we do, the names of the Johns who were involved in these cases around, I think it was 3 owners of these establishments where there was prostitution, have already been charged. The women, I think correctly, are not being charged. Do you support the SJC's decision that the names of all of these men should be made public?
Well, we were arguing this case on behalf of the magistrate. So we were for transparency and greater transparency than, say, the defense counsel for the various folks that were involved.
However.
And no,
okay.
No, and I will say why we think this is important is, as we do our human trafficking work, for it's bigger, as we do our human trafficking work, and shout out to Jen Snook and the entire team, they do incredible work. It is really difficult to get accountability for folks that are trafficked, and it happens here in Massachusetts. And why? Because victims, right, they don't necessarily want to come forward or have to appear in court and to testify and to share. And so one strategy that people have been thinking about as we work with advocates is, how do you go after those Johns? How do you hold them accountable? And at the same time, why is this difficult? Because sometimes it's the very one of the many Johns that is key to you actually getting a victim accountability because they come forward as a witness. So I just want to say that we are actively thinking about how we can be more creative in the shaming of Johns, within the confines of the law, of course, to hold them accountable as well as a way to eliminate human trafficking in this country, but also here in Massachusetts, sadly.
So speaking of transparency, one last thing that will take another minute or two, and the legislature, in this case, total lack of transparency. We talked to you last month about these shared appreciation mortgages, and for those who don't know what they are, I'm going to describe them, and please correct me if I'm wrong. A bank forecloses on a homeowner. A company, the Shared Appreciation Mortgage Company, is only one in Massachusetts, Blue Hub, rushes in, buys the home from the bank, sells it back to the original homeowner at a profit, charges them a higher interest rate than is the average thing, and part of the deal is they will share in the equity when the property is sold. There's litigation suggesting by some of the homeowners we were never told about the shared equity thing. When you were here last month and we asked you about that, was accurate, right? Was that inaccurate? Okay. Here's what you said. We were against any industry going to the State House, including Blue Hub, and looking to create an exception from our consumer protection laws. So if anything, we stand with the constituents and Bruce Marks from NACA, who brought this to our attention, because no one should be exempt from our consumer protection laws. And if someone's trying to do that, we should, all sort of flags should go up. Well, as you know, and I think people know now, in the Economic Development Bill, the Senate, with no hearing, no public notice, anything, puts it in the bill. It passes. Governor Healy signs it. She has a relationship with a woman who owns a Blue Hub, but she says they never discussed this thing. I have several questions. One, what's your reaction to the decision by the legislature and the governor to make this into law and provide them? And by the way, again, this is only one company this covers. It doesn't mention them in the legislation. It describes a kind of company which coincidentally only Blue Hub satisfies the criteria for. What's your reaction to this exemption from consumer protection? And why should any company in any field ever be exempt from consumer protection laws?
They shouldn't, and we opposed it. And actually, I wanted to call out Bruce because he wrote an article, I think, to the Globe, where I said it's just inaccurate, and sort of lumped me and the office in with other folks, where I said, wait a minute, let me be crystal clear. We have opposed this. And we have lended our advocacy to constituents in that opposition. We've also flagged that, yes, there's a court litigation right now by constituents who felt as though this program did not benefit them. That is ongoing, and there could be a result soon. And I know many folks said, wait until that resolves itself. We don't win every battle at the State House, and I don't want to suggest that we don't work closely with the folks there. There are some things, of course, in the econ bill that we appreciated. We worked with the governor on, we worked with the state legislature on, but on this particular provision, we did not think it should have passed.
Did you ever discuss it with Governor Healy?
No, but I will say we discussed it with her team, right? Okay. Just like we do with every other provision within the econ bill. But we made it crystal clear to folks in the State House and the administration that we were opposed to this, and that we have some of the strongest consumer protection laws in the country. And if you give one product or one company an exception, you open up the floodgates potentially for others to also then begin to seek out an exception. And that's concerning to us. And on top of that, as we do this work, as I do this work, and I have to go to conferences to work with my fellow colleagues, you have folks who will lobby, you have folks coming up to us pushing for whatever product they're selling. And we've been saying, if it's a good product, you shouldn't be in fear of our consumer protection laws, because they're designed for folks that are looking to deceive and not be transparent with our constituents to make a profit. And so now we are sitting with the possibility of having to come up with some regulations. So we're figuring this out.
You're in charge of the regulations, correct?
Yes, and we still have to figure this out.
I don't know if I assume you're aware of this, that my understanding is that a motion for summary judgment was filed this morning by Blue Hub asking that the whole case be dismissed. I assume their argument is that and again,
I wasn't
I just
aware
quickly
of that because I was outside in the rain giving out.
I quickly read this at 5 minutes at 11, but I believe their argument is that this law, which went into effect by emergency preamble, meaning immediately, is retroactive, and if they are right, that would wipe out all this litigation. Is it retroactive?
We'll see. I have to still review it, and even us getting involved in terms of the regulations, we're still reviewing the language because it's not necessarily mandatory. There's a back and forth. So I told my team, or I tell the public, give us a little bit of time, and we'll also have to review what summary judgment motion they actually filed. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, again, I just read it briefly. Just one more thing on this. Beyond the merits, it would seem to me, and maybe this is naive, but I don't think it is, if the legislature was proud of granting an exemption from consumer protection for a company that is in litigation being sued by homeowners, low-income homeowners who believe that it's a predatory operation, that the least they would do is introduce an amendment in the light of day so that people like you, people like the homeowners have an opportunity to lobby against it, speak against it, rather than speaking against it after there's law. Is there any excuse for them doing this in the dark of night?
I can't answer. I can't speak for the legislature. I can speak for myself as AG and my office. We absolutely believe in transparency. Even when we are making decisions and also filing legislation, we have the ability to file legislation as well. We want not only to be transparent, we want to have hearings, we want to engage a range of stakeholders as we go into the State House to push for legislation that would help us improve outcomes on a whole host of issues for our constituents. That's what we do. And it's a bottom-up approach. It's a transparent approach. And even if folks don't necessarily like where we land, at the end of the day, we recognize that process is so important, sometimes more important than the outcome itself. So in this, we registered our opposition. We don't win every battle, just like on competitive electric supply. I'm still pushing for that. That is an issue that must be dealt with before we have more consumers going into millions of dollars of losses because of an industry that is preying upon them. We haven't won that yet, so I'm doing my part.
Two last quick questions. As the person who will issue the regulations, are you the one who determines whether or not the statute, as the amendment as passed, is retroactive?
So we will figure this out in reviewing the legislation, reviewing the language, et cetera, and also figuring out what will go in those regulations. I just asked folks to give me a little bit of time.
Last
We've
question.
been dealing with a lot of things.
Understood. You mentioned process. A bunch. 3 homeowners have been in touch with us in the last 24 hours saying they're attempting to meet with you unsuccessfully. Will you meet with some of the homeowners affected here? From who believe they were victims of Blue Hub?
Oh, okay. I thought we had, but
well, if you they say you have, but you'd be willing to.
We'll follow up. Yeah, and let me tell you.
You would be willing to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But let me actually say this. Many of the constituents who have brought these issues up, I know them from my previous council work.
Right.
When I stood with folks who did not have a successful outcome. I don't want to suggest that everyone didn't. There were some folks that benefited from this program.
Oh, there's no question.
But there were some who didn't, and many of them lived in Mattapan and Dorchester, where I was the city councilor, and I didn't have the authority to help. I couldn't go into court, et cetera. So I already knew what I was walking into, and so we're using the tools of our office to help. We're watching that litigation closely, and it's why we registered opposition.
Okay.
We know the details, we know the weeds.
Last thing, this is really, I'm sorry to belabor this, but to me it's so outrageous and so important. Last question, just so I understand. When a company, forget this is not Blue Hub, so you can answer the question. When a company is exempted by statute from consumer protection, and they then deal with a consumer, and they intentionally lie to the consumer about what the terms of an agreement are, and the consumer says, you lied to me, I want to sue you, I can prove you lied to me, they're precluded from that suit by an exemption from consumer protection, are they not?
Well, it depends. So in the context, why we were concerned about this particular exemption is that it gives people an exemption. And now we have to go to the drawing board to figure out how we still make things applicable to them in the face of an exemption to our strong consumer protection laws. This is uncharted territory for the office. This is why we were concerned that if you do it for one particular model, that it could open the floodgates for other exemptions. This is why we registered opposition every step of the way, including after passage. And so I want to be clear on that. And to the folks who, I thought folks of the team had already met with folks.
I could be wrong. I'm just reading texts I got.
But even the folks who are texting on this, we understand. We already know the details. I knew it from City Council. Now it's our job to do what we can to protect them, and we will.
Thank you for your answers.
But we'll keep working. I mean, I can't. I hear you loud and clear, but I also hear those homeowners, because I remember when I was on the City Council, them coming into our office where they couldn't afford a lawyer. They couldn't afford to get any type of accountability. And there were several of them who had real concerns. So we will connect with them.
Got it.
And if it's not this, there may be some other laws that might be applicable, other ways to help.
Good.
And we will.
Thank you.
You know, we have a lot of texts from people who feel that they've been shafted by their insurance company, not getting responses. One of them is this one: we have a child mental health support needs. So few service providers except insurance have to self-submit for reimbursement, but our insurance company makes it almost impossible to submit. One officer said, mail the documents. Literally months went by. We had signature proof they got it. They never processed their submission. We resubmitted it electronically twice. Finally, some process, but codes were wrong, so we didn't get full reimbursement. We are $10,000 in the hole already. They named the insurance company, and they basically say that they do not. The rest of the email is too long. But
this is an email or a text?
This is a text.
So this person, I would say
number.
anyone who has text. Well, we'll take that from you.
Okay.
But I don't know if you reply, so I'll just say
I didn't reply.
But 617-727-8400 is our consumer protection line that people can call. I always want to put that out there. Yep. They can also go through our website, but I understand that can be more challenging. And so we can also take information for folks to follow up. We have divisions that are front-facing to help folks with consumer protection issues, working with companies to resolve them and, on their behalf, and working with the consumer. So please do reach out to us, and we can follow up.
We only have 20 seconds left. Marjorie's too shy to ask this question.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how to cook a turkey, so can she come to your house for Thanksgiving?
I won't be cooking a turkey.
You're not cooking either. I'm so glad to hear that, Adrian.
No, I'm not.
What are you doing?
So Mom can cook, so...
Good move.
But the sad part is, did I say the sad part? Love you, honey. I'm going to be with my husband's family in Connecticut, and they do a good turkey, but they do a fried one and an oven baked.
Oh, there you go.
So they do both. But I can't